Chapter 301, Regular Season, The Group of Death. Translator, Atlas Studios. Editor, Atlas Studios. Under the bright, burning sun in the middle of the desert, the two teams were staring at each other with a sand hill in between. The players were soaked in sweat as they stood on the burning sand and entered the energy-draining status. Even though they were not moving, their energy points were still decreasing at a steady rate. The location in the desert is too open, which is bad for us. We are probably going to lose here. Lone Crane was discouraged. This was Frenzied Sword's Rivervale club team. They were lucky as they had not met any strong teams. They had struggled their way through the competition, and now, they are on the last batch of the qualifiers. If they won this game, they could get into the next stage. But it seemed that Rivervale's luck had run out. The randomized map was an open desert, which was bad for a composition focused on close combat. Lone Crane was annoyed, and because of that, the whole team's morale was down. Frenzied Sword stepped up to change the atmosphere and frowned. "Don't worry, the fight hasn't started yet. We still have the chance to win." Lone Crane shook his head. "The chance is too abysmally slim. You are the leader, don't you say things words." Frenzied Swords got more and more unsatisfied on how the Lone Crane led the team. He had no leadership skills and did not give any insightful command. On top of that, he only brought a negative energy to the team. "Oh? Then what do you suggest we should do?" Lone Crane glanced over. "The enemy has a strong ranged attack abilities, so the only way for us is to close the distance. Of course, we will only get kite if we charge in recklessly, so the best way is to lure them into an ambush. I can hide in the sand, and you all act like you are running away and lure them to where I'm hiding. Then I can pressure their backline while you all turn around and attack. This is the only way. Luckily, I still have 2 shields for cover. Who wants to ambush with me?" Frenzied Sword said as he took out 2 oxygen shields. This was equipment that he always brought, and it was the essential tool for the plan to work. The teammates all looked at each other, and this time, Lone Crane replied, "Since this is your idea, if we lose, you will be responsible for this." Lone Crane was obviously trying to avoid the blame so that he would be off the hook if he lost the game. Frenzied Sword hated this type of behavior and stopped paying attention to him. Looking at his teammates, a pugilist sped forward to be his partner for the ambush. They quickly selected a spot, and Frenzied Sword and his teammate hid under the cover and sank into the sand. Lone Crane and his team on the surface made some disguises and went on with the operation. They walked up the hill and exposed themselves in the vision of the enemy. Hee. Seems that they can't wait any longer. Isaac from the opposing team laughed. The other team with 6 people saw the movement of Lone Crane and his team. Isaac looked like the skillful one in his team, but in reality, all the 6 contestants were spies, all from other nations' clubs to challenge the competitive league in Planet Aquamarine. Every league had this type of team. The enemy is just a small club. I saw their matches before, and they excel in close combat, but they have no synergy. Plus, we have the map advantage, so as long as we keep our distance, victory is ours. They moved up toward Rivervale and initiated their attacks while keeping their distance. Most of the players were espers. Isaac could create a small tornado, while one of his teammates could shoot laser beams from his finger. Another could even create a small white fish ball that exploded like a grenade. Lone Crane and the other 4 ran with tails between their legs. Isaac's team quickly chased after them, but soon, they realized that there were only 4 people in Rivervale team. Where did the other 2 go? Isaac raised his suspicion and raised his hand. "Halt. I think they are luring us into a trap." Isaac thought that if Rivervale was luring them, then if he stopped, Rivervale would also stop, or at least they would slow down their pace to bait Isaac. However, Rivervale did not slow down and ran as far as they could. Lone Crane kept on running forward while being demotivated. He could not understand Frenzied Sword's strategy. Then he suddenly had an idea to push all the blame on Frenzied Sword. If he directly fought the enemy head-on without telling Frenzied Sword, at least it would seem like Lone Crane tried his best, while Frenzied Sword was hiding the entire fight. This would definitely make the higher officials be disappointed in Frenzied Sword. However, he could not purposely steer away from where Frenzied Sword was hiding since the rest of the teammates also knew the location. Therefore, the only thing that Lone Crane could do was make them look like they were luring the enemy into a trap. Thus, Lone Crane kept on running, regardless of whether the enemy followed or not. Lone Crane had been in the profession circle for years. For a man without much glory and achievements, he had been hired by Rivervale with a higher pay than before. However, he had never cared about winning or losing. The only thing that he wanted was to keep the position as a leader and enjoy the wealthy pay and luxurious life. There were all kinds of people in the professional scene, and the type like Lone Crane was also common. However, Isaac misunderstood the intention. He shouted, "Look at them go. They don't look like they are trying to lure us, and there's a lower chance that there will be an ambush in the open field. Let's chase after them." Unfortunately, Isaac was wrong. After chasing Rivervale for a while, they reached the ambush area, and a spot within the team exploded, covering them in sand. Frenzied Sword and his teammate rushed out and charged into the backline. It was so sudden that Isaac and his teammates' jaws dropped. Frenzied Sword used all his strength and tore open the enemy's formation. Lone Crane, who was far away, also frowned, and he had no choice but to lead his team back into the battle. The scene was in chaos. Despite the ambush, Isaac and his teammates did not back down easily, and Rivervale still had to fight an intense battle. Luckily, Frenzied Sword had a great performance and eliminated the squishy espers, getting a double kill. After Isaac fell to the ground, the surroundings finally quieted down, and one could only hear wind blowing through the sand. Rivervale's victory. We won. Frenzied Sword waved his fist. We actually got into the next stage. Lone Crane could not close his mouth as he was shocked. Was the enemy so stupid that they could not tell his obvious act? As the final round came to a close, the names of the victors of the qualifiers were announced. All the players were excited, and the attention from the public also reached its peak. The qualifiers were just the appetizer. The regular season was the main course. From here now on, the competition would be in a normal schedule unlike the qualifiers. Every match would be intense and thrilling. From thousands of teams and hundreds of thousands of players, there were only 38 teams for group bracket and 62 players for individual bracket. Han Xiao schemed through the list, and the four powerhouses had all made it into the regular season, while the rest of the teams are all famous clubs such as Madhouse, Mystic 9, and Storm. There were clubs from other countries, and there were only 3 non-professional teams. Rivervale was in the list of qualified teams. Han Xiao recalled that back in his own world, Rivervale never got into the regular season, and instead, a team with foreign players got in. As for the individual bracket, Frenzied Sword in both worlds was qualified for regular season, and the one in this world had more attention from the public compared to that of the other world. There were only 4 mechanic players in the individual bracket, and all of them were Cannon Master except Frenzied Sword, who was Mechanical Pugilist. Because of that, the audience showed more interest in him. In addition, the recordings of Rivervale's matches were released, and everyone witnessed how Frenzied Sword carried his team to victory. On the contrary, no one cared about the real leader, Lone Crane. In the eyes of the audience, he was just a side character who served no purpose, and they thought that Frenzied Sword was the irreplaceable part of the team. Lone Crane was envious of the glory, yet he could not duplicate Frenzied Sword's performance. He could only watch the Frenzied Sword getting more and more popular. Frenzied Sword was indeed a natural talent in close combat fighting. His skills kept on improving, and other mechanic class players replayed the tape of his matches to learn the techniques. Some players even went through some older posts and found out that Frenzied Sword was one of the mysterious characters under Black Phantom. The high-quality equipment and buffs had to have been given by Black Phantom. All the players could only drool next to the fancy equipment, and Han Xiao earned another wave of popularity. They did so much better than in my old world. Han Xiao was satisfied and was glad that his work paid off. A few days later, the secondary league also finished their matches, and only the top 2 got into the regular season. In the end, there were 40 teams in the group bracket and 64 players in individual bracket. The official site announced the results of the randomized groups in the regular season. The players were evenly spread out into A, B, C, and D groups. For every group, there were 10 teams for the group bracket and 16 players in the individual bracket. The regular season used a points system, where teams would fight against each other in rotation. Only the 2 teams with highest points would be eligible for the next stage in the group brackets. For individual bracket, there would be 4 players coming out of each group. The players' jaws dropped as they saw the list of the groups. Fried Eggplants with Fish, Dynasty, and Long Sky 3 powerhouses were all in Group A. Moreover, Tiger Dragon Club and Sky Palace Club were also in Group A with another foreign club team. This was the group of death. With so many strong teams, only 2 teams could get out of this group stage. At least one of the powerhouses would be eliminated from the competition. This news threw the fans of those teams into turmoil. The atmosphere was already tense and nervousness when the regular season had not even started. Chapter 302, The Hidden Main Storyline. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. Galaxy Times made an objective analysis for each group in the tournament. Group A was the most competitive. The fan-favorite team since the start of the tournament, Long Sky, might even be eliminated there. Although Hao Tian was still overpowering all his opposition, many of the other teams that had survived thus far had been conserving their strength. Most of the teams had not revealed their trump cards yet. Under such conditions, even strong teams like Long Sky would have hard fights ahead. The fans of the teams who were placed into Group A were not having any of it. The fans of the 3 big guilds, especially, were flaming and spamming in the forums about how the tournament was rigged and why all those strong teams were placed in the same group. But their arguments were not at all convincing. Most of the neutral audience believed that if each of the 4 big guilds had been placed into different battle groups, then that would really have meant that the tournament was rigged. Of course, what was logic in the face of the crazed fans? The discussions on the forums were getting more and more heated as the tournament entered its pre-seasons. The pre-season matches did not count toward a team's score and served as more of a warm-up for the teams to gauge each other's strengths or even misguide one another. Compared to formal matches, these warm-up matches were much less pressuring on the players. The audience loved watching these matches as players often played without restraint and used whatever tactics and plays they wanted. Each team's mistakes and insane outplays were soon turned into memes and analyzed on the forums. Bun Hit Dog also made a few videos on these warm-up matches. After the preseason matches would be a cooling period where teams would be given time to rest up and regroup. This was also when the clubs would amp up their advertising to hype up the next stage, which was the regionals. The waves of advertisements would be used to further excite the audience. Once the official matches began, it was already the 6th month of the Galaxy calendar. Han Xiao had stayed in the shelter this whole time to farm experience points from the players. Other than that, there was not much else for him to do. He had already met the requirements for the 3rd part of the hidden main storyline mission, but he could not get in contact with Hans and thus could not turn in the mission. This was the first time that Han Xiao had heard about this mission, and he was not sure how things were supposed to go. When he still could not find Hans despite going through the Darknet's intelligence network, Han Xiao realized that something was wrong. If even the Darknet, the largest intelligence hoarder on the planet, could not find him, then Hans was really missing. After some more digging, Han Xiao found out that Hans had last been seen at a barren wasteland called the Somer Desert. This kind of sound familiar? Han Xiao frowned. Oh right, I once visited this desert for a bounty mission. Basic strengthened life was also obtained from this place. It was the ruins of a nation, and there were also wanderers trying to find traces of magic or the like there. Although Han Xiao was not very close with Hans, since he was the NPC who gave out the hidden main storyline mission, Han Xiao was not just going to sit still as he went missing. Bennett had a similar thought. Just as the official matches were about to start, Han Xiao left the shelter and arrived at the Somer Desert with Bennett. Under the sun's glare, heat waves constantly rolled across the desert floor. All one could see past the barbed wires of the Darknet checkpoint was an endless sea of sand. Hans was last seen a month ago. He resupplied at this checkpoint before entering the Somer Desert, but he never returned. The man in charge of the checkpoint reported the details to Han Xiao and Bennett while showing the two the supply reports proving his words. I have already sent out search parties to look for his tracks, but, the sands in the Somer Desert constantly shift and reform, and there haven't been any concrete results yet, said Bennett. Han Xiao glanced and asked, can't you come up with a better idea than that? Bennett was helpless about this. Telecommunications and any other kind of communication all met a dead end. There's no other way. Searching this way was like trying to look for a needle in a haystack. Han Xiao shook his head. This is too much of a waste of time, but there really does seem to be no other way. Let's hope something comes up soon. The Somer Desert buried countless secrets, and Hans may have run into a tricky situation this time. When Han Xiao started thinking about the ruins of Felania and the remnants of a magic civilization, a thought started to form at the back of his mind. I'm afraid that Hans may have already died. Bennett sighed. Han Xiao was not too sure about that. In the past, Bennett had raised tombstones for Hans and the others, but Han Xiao felt like things were different this time. First of all, the hidden main storyline had not failed yet and was only stuck at the third stage. Han Xiao felt that Hans should still be alive, as he was the mission NPC. Maybe this was all part of the storyline. Since there was no other way to progress the mission, Han Xiao decided to patiently wait for something to happen. Although he was curious about what this hidden main storyline would lead to, the reward that the mission offered was not that tempting. The great mechanic Han did not need to work hard to farm experience at the moment, and the experience that would be rewarded upon mission completion was nothing in Han Xiao's eyes. After sending out some more orders for the men, the two got back on their planes to return. On the plane, Bennett suddenly said, "I heard that your shelter is welcoming more and more Inhumans. Make sure to keep a careful watch over them in case they decide to cause trouble one day." Han Xiao raised his eyebrow. "What are you trying to say?" "Inhumans have unclear origins, and they often demonstrate weird behavior," said Bennett with a heavy expression. "They are a ticking time bomb. If all the Inhumans decide to group together and rebel, the planet will see another bloodbath. We can't take another war. My sources tell me that the Six Nations had already contacted the space civilization, and they will soon send personnel down to our planet to investigate the Inhumans." "I know." Han Xiao gave off a faint smile and patted Bennett's shoulder a few times. Not only was Han Xiao aware of the Godara investigators' future visit, he even knew the specific date and time when their spaceship would enter the atmosphere. This was fate smiling down on him. The spaceship sent by Godara would be his chance to venture out into the stars, in about another month. During the next month, Han Xiao followed his original plan and continued amassing experience points. More and more players were visiting the shelter every day due to the ongoing tournament, and Han Xiao never ran out of players to farm experience from. Han Xiao occasionally followed the tournament. There was now a new match format, the duel. Each team would send out 6 players to battle against another team's 6, one at a time. Winners would stay on the fight against the opposing team's next player, until one team has no players left. There was also a point tallying system where the total points your team would win, in the case of a victory, would be 6 points minus the number of players who were defeated in the match. Duels added variety to the tournament. As the official matches progressed, the situation within the battle groups had become clearer. Battle Group B, C, D's respective leading and runner-up teams had pulled away from the other teams in the group and were guaranteed to go to the next stage. They were Temple of God, Thunderstorm, Mountain Sea, and teams from 3 other foreign guilds. Frenzied Sword's team was unfortunately one of the bottom-placing teams and had no chance to advance. However, being able to enter the official matches had already allowed this new B team to suddenly explode in popularity. Their team's success had caused Lone Crane to become ambitious, and he wanted to obtain an even better score. However, reality was harsh. All the teams that had survived to that stage were strong teams with elite players. Their team's overall strength was just too low, so no matter how hard he worked, they suffered defeat after defeat. Lone Crane was shocked, and he realized that his hard work was not going to make the difference. His ambition was also blown to the winds. But he was still a veteran and was quickly able to reset his mindset. "That's enough. It's already not bad that we could get this far and fight with all these top teams." With this thought in mind, Lone Crane believed that he would be receiving handsome reward from his gaming club. However, reality gave him a face slap, yet again. Rivervale Gaming Club official announced that they were going to have Frenzied Sword take over the team captain position for the future. Lone Crane immediately lost his standing, and the announcement was even followed by them sending Lone Crane to terminate his contract. He was utterly flabbergasted. The club's management were not blind. Frenzied Sword's performance in this tournament was clear for all to see. He had made it into the top 3 in the individual category and qualified for the regionals before finally becoming the only mechanic left within Planet Aquamarine's top 16 individual fights contestant. He was even dubbed China's #1 mechanical pugilist. A player with such a potential would naturally be taken extra care of by Rivervale. This was only the first tournament, and there were still many more chances in the future. They planned on having Frenzied Sword become the club's pillar and were in the process of building a team around Frenzied Sword. On the other hand, Lone Crane, who lacked both results and commitment, was mercilessly kicked out of the club. Frenzied Sword did not really like Rivervale at first, but now that he knew they wanted to build a team around him, he was ecstatic. This was treatment that not even some star players would get. Once he obtained good results, his professional gaming career would kick off. Frenzied Sword was already somewhat of a star now, but he was not satisfied and always looked to improve himself to do even better in the future. He was full of determination, and he also made a note to himself to hang on to Han Xiao no matter what. Good things would always follow if he did. Frenzied Sword's results for the first tournament was actually already better than in the past. Han Xiao felt emotional as it was like watching his own kid grow up. Or more like raising a player. On the other hand, Electrolux, who had made it into the top 16 in Han Xiao's past, could not even make it out of the elimination rounds this time. This was mainly due to Han Xiao's interference with his early development this time, and it would not even have mattered if Electrolux had grade A potential for his Esper abilities. In Planet Aquamarine's tournament, only Battle Group A's standings were still unclear. This was a true death group. There are only a few more rounds of matches left, yet the top 5 teams were basically even in points. There was no way to tell who would come out on top in the end. Currently, Long Sky held 3rd place. Chapter 303, List of Finalists, Advancement of Plans. In the group stage, Long Sky's momentum was repeatedly stopped by Dynasty and fried eggplants with fish. Having expectations on a team was a double-edged sword. When Long Sky performed poorly, the attention from the media would work against them as they sang the song of pessimism for the chances of Long Sky making it through the group stage. As an experienced team, Long Sky had a strong resilience to pressure. In the last few matches of Group A, the number of viewers again broke the record, but in the match between Long Sky and Dynasty, King Admiral single-handedly took down 4 opponents in the group one-on-ones and secured 1st place in the group bracket. Thus, Long Sky fell to 4th place. Under pessimism and doubts, the last round began, and Long Sky's opponent was fried eggplants with fish, which was in 2nd place in the bracket. There was a large difference in points, and in order for Long Sky to qualify, they had to completely dominate the match and take as many points as they could. However, fried eggplants with fish was also a powerhouse, and there was no hope that Long Sky could make it out of group stage. But just when the audience thought that Long Sky was going to be eliminated, Hao Tian and his team pulled off a miracle team fight, which aced the entire enemy team. No mistakes could be found during the one-on-ones, and they walked over the enemy. The 3 chariots Dancing Fish Dragon, Perfume Bear, and Sun Eggplant were dominated by Long Sky without knowing what happened. On the live stream, the screen was exploding with intensity in every frame. Fans from both teams were on the edge of their seats, as if their hearts were going to burst. Every time there was a turn of events, the audience would scream with excitement and nervousness. The points of Long Sky skyrocketed, and in an instant, they had the same points with the fried eggplants with fish. The final outcome was determined on the team fight, and Long Sky surpassed their opponent and qualified for the next stage as 2nd place in the group. Long Sky pulled a reverse sweep. In the fight of powerhouses, fried eggplants with fish was destroyed. Long Sky promoted to the next stage by the width of a hair. Fried eggplants with fish was defeated with humiliation. Is this the end of a powerhouse? Competitions for Group A have come to an end. Dynasty and Long Sky move on to the quarter-finals. Long Sky's unbelievable comeback exploded in the forums. Fans of Long Sky were crying in tears as if it was a new year, and the tragic atmosphere and tone of the media quickly turned around. Only words of compliments were seen on the news, no matter how badly they had performed previously. Dynasty, Long Sky, and fried eggplants with fish all held a press conference after the match. The reporters first congratulated the winning teams, and the representatives of the 2 teams appreciated the congratulations. Both teams replied to the questions with cliché formalities, thanking the fans and those who supported them along the way. In the final session of the press conference, the reporter gave the microphone to fried eggplants with fish and asked, "Would you like to share anything after your defeat?" The representative for fried eggplants with fish froze and said, "We performed poorly in the last match, and we did not meet our expectations. During the match, we made a lot of mistakes, and we could have done better. Long Sky is a strong opponent, and everyone witnessed how." This reply had been prepared before the press interview. They first started with acknowledging their mistakes and tried to learn from it, then they went ahead and apologized to the fans. This response was a standard procedure if one lost a game, so the reporter could only stay quiet, and he did not even bother writing any notes. Suddenly, the team leader, Sun Eggplant, stood up. Even though he was known as the last of the 3 chariots, he was the leader of the 3 people. Sun Eggplant interrupted the response and grabbed the microphone from the representative. He faced the confused reporters and stared at Long Sky. I don't want to say these fluffy words like we tried our best. We lost, and that's an undeniable fact, but I can't let it go. I will win the title back next time. Hao Tian, since we both entered the quarterfinals in the individual bracket, if you see me, prepare to die. Hao Tian did not back down. The result won't change no matter how many times you challenge me. Both of them started at each other, and neither backed down. Such exchanges were the ones that were exciting to write about. The reporters smiled and quickly recorded it. Dynasty, who was on the side, glanced at the two. It was ironic that the first seed team was just a side character. Second Prince clenched his fists and said, the reporters are ignoring us now. I might as well go challenge. King Admiral was struggling to keep his eyes open as if he was sleeping. He slapped Second Prince on the back of his head and said, don't find trouble. Second Prince pushed away his hand and replied with annoyance, stop hitting me, you freak. Why are you bitching about me joining the challenge? B** starred, you are not even in the semifinals. King Admiral's poke through the heart of Second Prince. Second Prince's face turned red, and he stared at King Admiral with anger, as if he was going to kick him in crouch. Second Prince felt that he was being mocked. King Admiral had not only advanced into the next stage in individual bracket, but he was also first seed and had the most points. He had been invited to the All-Stars, while Second Prince had been eliminated. That was why Second Prince was upset. At the same time, Temple of God also had their own press conference. They were lucky as they had been allocated into a group without much competition. They had also been invited to the All-Stars games. Li Ji claimed that they would bring trophy and pride to the country as they headed to the international competition. Temple of God claimed that they were the strongest and that they were the dragon's head of powerhouses. Li Ji walked on the path of China's representative team. Even though he was ranked second of China's players, the King Admiral was always timid and low-key with a casual appearance. On the other hand, Li Ji was handsome and strong, and they had the same popularity with tons of fans. There was a significant number of females within Li Ji's fan base, while most of the fans for King Admiral were adult men. The fight between their fan bases was also interesting, and it was usually one of the biggest shows in the scene. As long as Li Ji and King Admiral fought against each other, this would be the extra show that would for sure show up. The teams who had qualified for playoffs all had their press conferences, and all sorts of statements were made by the teams. Some were extremely confident that they would win the finals, while some were humbler and more reserved. These scenes sure showed the variety of stories that one could see in the professional scene. And now, the schedule for finals was announced. Top 8 of group bracket, 5 Chinese teams: Dynasty, Long Sky, Thunderstorm, Mystic 9. 3 foreign teams: Son of Wind, Beast, Golden Orange. Top 16 of individual bracket, King Admiral, Sun Eggplant, Hao Tian, Li Ji, Frenzied Sword, Rainy Kim. Seeing the list, Han Xiao laughed as if it was harvest season. He, quite a lot of them are also players that were famous in my previous world. Han Xiao smiled. The other reason he had followed the professional scene was that it was a venue for him to pick out skillful players. Anyone who got into the Planet Aquamarine competitive scene was a talent. In some nicer words, Han Xiao was preparing to bring natural talents to explore the galaxy. And this time, he would not only bring a few people, he would bring an entire fleet of players as his assistants. Because they would always revive after death, players were an extremely useful tools. Even though they were a bit weak, but there would be room for improvement in the new version. Even though robots could be used as gunpowder, one still needed money to make them. Players were free. Han Xiao was planning to start a family by taking the younger talents. He already had a plan. To create his own base. In version 1.0, players did not have a way to step into the galaxy, but if Han Xiao could provide the transportation, even the professional players would be shocked. Han Xiao had quite a lot of missions to complete, but there would not be much if he spread out the workload. This would limit the number of players that he could nurture. However, if the players were able to travel into the galaxy and be exposed to the opportunities around the universe, there would be endless missions, and it would definitely be attractive to players. This way, Han Xiao could bypass the threshold of missions that Han Xiao could take. The players would be at an advantage if they were first to start their adventure in the galaxy. No one would not be jealous of the opportunity. At the same time, Han Xiao could again restate his presence and make headlines again. The chosen players would slowly become closer to Han Xiao voluntarily and create a sense of acknowledgement. Han Xiao already had a blueprint for his plan. The number of players that he could take still depended on the situation. Inside his secret base, Han Xiao got up from his sofa, reached the armory, and entered the password. The golden wall folded and opened up. A transparent pillar was in the room, and it was filled with gel and liquid. Inside the pillar was a brand new amphiptera suit. It's time to go. Han Xiao pressed the button, and the gel was washed out of the pillar. The surface of the amphiptera mechanical suit gave a cold shine under the light. Chapter 304, The Visitor from Above. In the night sky, far away from planet Aquamarine, a few wormholes were opening and closing while leaking rays of rainbow and lighting up the dark universe into a colorful playground. These lights focused together and scattered away, as if it was a thin layer of silk drifting through space and mesmerized anyone who saw the view. Around the center of the shattered wormhole was a large space station floating in space, and the shape was like three buildings stacked on each other horizontally. On the side and on the top of the space stations were different towers, some of which were the signal tower, some were space stabilizer, and others were weaponry and garages for convoys. The bottom of the space station was a large metallic sphere, and a dark blue light surrounded the circle as if it was the path of orbit. This was the space station's reactor, engine, and gravitation stabilizer. The space station had a very complex and detailed structure. It looked advanced and futuristic. The windows of the buildings were space decks for spacecrafts to dock. One would have no perception of the space station without looking at the map. Each one of the decks could accommodate a spaceship that was a few hundred meters long. The space station had tens of thousands of decks, and it looked at an artificial mountain range. It was Zurich Hub, the transit station of the Garden Galaxy. The wormholes floating around the station were the different pathways to different civilizations in the Kerbal Stellar. Using an immense amount of resources in exchange for help from the advanced civilization, a stable stellar gate had been built, which allowed people to travel across different areas and solar systems in the Kerbal Stellar quickly and efficiently. The space station took in thousands of spaceships every second, as if it was a beehive. A small spaceship covered in yellow and white flew into a space deck. The spaceship shook as it entered the gravitational area, and it headed into the garage after a few minutes. The garage was filled with blue and white. The original materials for the garage were a combination of special metallic bonds and macromolecule materials. After a few seconds, the garage sounded with a woman's digital voice. Identity authorized. Permission granted to dock. Welcome, Captain Kurlod, Space Investigator 741 of Godara. Whoosh. The door to the aircraft opened, and a man walked down as a platform extended onto the ground. He was a male Godaran with light golden skin. His hair was white and had 7 braids on the back of his head. There were golden spheres that were tied on the end of the braids. He had similar facial features to a human, but there was more space between the parts of the face. The body structure was also identical to that of human: 1 brain, 2 hands, 2 lands, and a schlong. There was nothing extra such as a tail or an additional limb. He was 2 meters tall, which was the average height of Godaran. Kurlod, who worked for the Godaran Space Investigation Department, was the captain of an investigation team. Even though his title was captain, he did not have any men under his command. He only had a Godara standardized suitcase, equipment, and the Observer, which was a small-sized spaceship. The spaceship was 30 meters long, and it could only hold 1 passenger. Kurlod was the one who had been sent to investigate the Inhumans on planet Aquamarine. Oh wow, a pure-blood Godaran. It's rare to see such an elite species. As the gate of the garage opened, a man wearing the worksuit for the space station laughed. He had the same appearance as Kurlod, but he was much shorter, and his skin was not as gold. This was half-breed Godaran, where one of his parents was another species. Huh, an inferior breed. Kurlod glanced at the worker and looked down at him. Godarans had extreme pride in remaining pure-blooded and denounces mixed breeds. It was part of their culture that they should discriminate against those who are not pure-blooded Godarans. That was why he called the worker inferior breed. The man did not bother and said, "Just register. How long will you park here, and where will you be heading to?" "Stopping for 2 days to refuel, then we'll head to Star Zone 9 to investigate an unusual phenomenon in an undeveloped civilization," Kurlod replied. "Star Zone 9? Isn't that a very dangerous place? Seems that you got the difficult work from your boss." But since it was an uncivilized place, the reason that they thought that it was an unexplained phenomenon was because of their lack of technology. I can just take a look and come back in no time. Kurlad raised his chin, walked out of the garage, and headed to the resting station in the middle of the space station. After the two left, the gate of garage closed. After some time, a black gluey object crawled out from the platform of the space dock. It looked like it was a life form, and this unknown object was only a meter squared large. The gluey liquid slowly crawled up to the observer and disappeared into the cracks of the spaceship. In the icy mountain range of planet Aquamarine's northern continent, a black helicopter with the Darknet logo rested on one of the mountains. Han Xiao crossed his arms in front of him and viewed the clouds drifting in the mountain range. The cold air kept on slipping into his sleeves, but Han Xiao did not feel slightly cold. On the other hand, the pilot who wore 3 layers of clothes was freezing to death. He asked with shaky voice, cough. Your Excellency, what are we doing here? Han Xiao looked at him with surprise. Are you new? Did you not learn the principle to never ask questions? Of course I did, the pilot said with teeth chattering from cold. But we have already waited for 4 days. Rather than not asking, I need to make sure if I need to prepare myself to die from hypothermia. Han Xiao laughed. What's your name? Huang Jian, just finished pilot training last month. Han Xiao was surprised. Huang Jian, both of the characters sound like he's a creep. He must have a bright future ahead of him. With the boss joking around, what could Huang Jian do? He could only act like he did not hear it and ask, Your Excellency, how long do we have to wait? 1 day at minimum, but it might take up to half a month. Huang Jian's face froze. The difference was too much. After some thought, Huang Jian raised his courage and asked another question that violated the principle. What are you waiting for? Han Xiao looked at him and replied, You'll know once it arrives. There were only 2 people in the chopper. They chattered to alleviate the boredom. However, most of the time, Han Xiao was watching the matches on the forum. The International All-Stars had started. All the top teams from each region competed fiercely, and the players brought endless entertainment onto the stage. Han Xiao used this to pass the time while waiting in the chopper. All-Stars had players from other regions, and all of them were strong teams from their respective countries, such as Magic Field from the United States, Rose Knights from the United Kingdom, Kimchi from Korea, and Tulip from France. All of them were in the same position in their countries as Temple of God in China. Seeing the familiar teams from the previous world, Han Xiao finally remembered that the champion of the first international competition was Tulip from France. All-Stars was the very first international competition, and all the players from different regions would pay close attention to this event. The popularity was at least 10 times greater than the competitions in local regions. All the winners from different countries would show their power and strength. Press conferences before and after the competitions were also filled with compliments and enthusiasm. This event was a chance for the top teams to advertise themselves, and it was also to promote the upcoming international stage. Temple of God from planet Aquamarine also grabbed some fans from other countries as they performed well in the matches. Li Ji was happy with the result. 3 days after the end of the All-Stars, every region started their quarter-finals. The competition format was a best-of-5 team battle. Long Sky was lucky that they met a weaker team from foreign country, so the powerhouses did not meet. As for the individual bracket, Hao Tian was not so lucky. In the first round, he had to fight Li Ji. Before the match, Li Ji was out of character as he issued an aggressive statement. The first opponent I will face is Hao Tian, and I think that it is good news. I can't say that I will beat him for sure. If I'm being humble, I think my chances of beating him are around 90%. Chapter 305, The Crash. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. Li Ji was very happy for suddenly becoming a hot topic among the players. Some even started to bet on his and Hao Tian's match. Although Li Ji had made it to the top 16, his main strategy revolved around slowly grinding opponents to death with his Esper abilities, and it was not all that entertaining. The vast majority of the bets were also made against Li Ji. Frenzied Sword was matched with Thunderstorm's Rainy Kim. Rainy Kim was also not an opponent to scoff at. Not only was she a pillar of the Thunderstorm battle team, she was also a great beauty. It was not uncommon for attractive female players to be well liked, especially in the esports scene, which was dominated by male players. Rainy Kim's popularity was through the roof, and many of her crazed fans even went to Riverdale Club's official page to bash and threaten Frenzied Sword, saying that if he won, they would never forgive him. Han Xiao had been waiting at the top of the mountain for 7 to 8 days, and the pros had already finished their first round of matches. Li Ji had surprisingly won the best of 5 against Hao Tian 3-1, winning 3 straight rounds after giving Hao Tian the first win. In the match recordings, Hao Tian was able to finish off Li Ji after the latter kite for 10 whole minutes. Li Ji actually used the first game to analyze Hao Tian's fighting style, and starting from the second game, Li Ji played much more proactively, as if he had seen through all of Hao Tian's moves. His Esper abilities were also perfect for this kind of combat, and Hao Tian, like a prey caught in a spider's web, lost 3 consecutive rounds. Li Ji was actually quite a talented player. His career as a pro gamer was not long, but he had obtained many accolades. Han Xiao had even thought about adding him to his list of spare tires. The media immediately moved its attention to Li Ji, who had now stolen all of Hao Tian's previous popularity. He had now advanced to the top 8, and his next opponent was the one who had clinched victory over Rainy Kim, Frenzied Sword. Frenzied Sword had barely won his fight and was able to advance to the top 8. It was supposed to be a happy thing, yet Rainy Kim's fans were relentlessly bashing him on the forums. The voices of Frenzied Sword supporters were drowned in a flood of hate comments. It was not until Rainy Kim herself came out and asked her fans to stop that they finally stopped this behavior, albeit feeling wronged by the person whom they were supporting. Frenzied Sword had won the match fair and square, but all that meant nothing in front of Rainy Kim's crazy fans. It also was not as if she could just openly denounce her fans, and she was only able to secretly apologize to Frenzied Sword about this. The two were more or less familiar with each other as they had met during the beta testing of the game. Frenzied Sword felt helpless. He had won with his own skills, yet he had now gained a bunch of haters. However, in the end, results were the most important when it came to these tournaments. The majority of the audience saw the match and believed that Frenzied Sword deserved the win. The excessive hate on Frenzied Sword even triggered a bunch of the more neutral players, and many rose up to become Frenzied Sword supporters, allowing Frenzied Sword to somehow still gain popularity despite all that. Fame often came with trouble, and it was often hard to say who would gain the most out of those kinds of things. In Han Xiao's opinion, most of the audience and fans were just looking for someone to flame and to argue for the sake of arguing. When these anti-fans found out who Frenzied Sword was up against next, they started to laugh behind his back. You deserve this. Haha, so this dumbass can only get this far. Boss Li Ji will definitely stomp all over him. Frenzied Sword had won about 50% of the practice fights against Hao Tian. Han Xiao thought that things were not looking good now that he was up against Li Ji, who had won 3 rounds in a row against Hao Tian. There was no way that both of the players that he had raised were going to be defeated by this Li Ji, right? Sir, the satellites have discovered an unidentified object that's rapidly approaching the atmosphere. The observatory of Raylan in the northern continent was suddenly in alert. The satellite showed a light dot approaching planet Aquamarine from outer space. Is this a meteor? Target appeared on our scanners 3 minutes ago before. If it was a meteor, our scanners should have noticed it much earlier. Moreover, meteors should be more affected by our planet's gravitational pull. Don't tell me it's an alien spaceship. The target has increased in velocity. Estimated landfall in 8 minutes. Coordinates? Is it an unpopulated area? Target is estimated to land in a barren mountain range in the northern continent. The specific location is right by our country's border. The professor in charge of the observatory immediately gave out the order. Report this to the higher UPS now. Request for troops to head to the landing site. Huang Jian was bored out of his mind. He had already been waiting in this darned wasteland for 10 days with Han Xiao, waiting for God knew what. But due to how legendary his boss was, they felt that Han Xiao was definitely there for a purpose, and he was curious as to what it could be. Han Xiao was standing in the snow when he suddenly looked up in the sky. He then immediately turned around and headed for the helicopter and took out his equipment. Something's finally happening. Huang Jian was elated and asked, "What are you doing?" "It's here," Han Xiao answered without even looking up and quickly put on his gear. "What's here?" Huang Jian did not get it. Just as he finished asking the question, an ear-piercing sound came down from the sky, causing Huang Jian to look up. A fireball flew down from the sky, and one could more or less make out the shape of an aircraft amid the flames. Boom! The aircraft crashed into the peak of a nearby mountain, blasting black rocks and snow everywhere. It then continued flying down and cleaved the path clean through the snowy valley, burning all the surrounding trees as it passed and causing a mini earthquake. The high mountain peak collapsed and caused a small avalanche. Huang Jian's mouth was hanging wide open, and all the color had drained out of his face. Space, space, spaceship. Huang Jian could not believe what he was seeing and looked toward Han Xiao. He had heard all sorts of things about Han Xiao, but it turned out that this man was even more mysterious than in the rumors. He could even know when a spaceship was going to crash land. Quickly, Han Xiao had put on Amphiptera, stretched out the joints, and took out the flight device bat wings before attaching it onto the empty slot on his back. His helmet's interface showed that the flight system was functioning normally. Fly! Han Xiao commanded in his mind as he sprinted toward the cliff's edge, and the wings started to make out buzzing noises. The turbines span at maximum capacity, and the tail end spat out blue flames. Han Xiao felt a force lift his body completely off the ground. The flight system was connected to Han Xiao's nerves, and he controlled it to fly toward the crash site. The observer ship had gotten itself stuck, and half of its body was in the ground. The surrounding trees and grass were still on fire, but the ship itself seemed to still be in perfect condition. Its energy shield had protected the ship from breaking apart during the crash. However, the massive impact did damage the generator, and now, the shield was greatly weakened while the engines were simply done for. Bang! The half-bent cabin door was kicked open, and Kurlad walked out unsteadily while holding his head in pain and throwing out random Godarin curses. Kurlad pressed on the golden bracelet on his right arm a few times, and a suit that looked like ancient armor sprang out and covered his entire body. A semi-transparent layer of energy surrounded his head in place of a helmet. This was the Godarin Observer combat suit. The combat suit was made to adapt to the different living conditions and environments on the various planets that the observers visited. A synthesized mechanical voice sounded out from within the suit. Coordinates stored. Location, Planet Aquamarine, 9th star system. Gravity level, low. Current temperature, 3 degrees Celsius. Climate type. Air moisture level. Civilization level, planetary. Danger level, low. Summary, survivable. Kurlad was still a bit shaken up and said, check body condition. Analyzing. Analysis complete. 3 bone fractures, moderate nerve damage, and minor damage to the brain. Inject nanohealant. Inject. Kurlad then felt a wave of coolness pass through him and was much better. He immediately climbed back into the cockpit as he wanted to check the reason the mainframe had stopped functioning properly. However, the warning told him that all systems were damaged. Kurlad felt rather helpless about this. He then tore apart the ship's exterior to reveal the internal structure. After ripping through a bunch of wires, he finally got his hands on a palm-sized metal box. The blue light shining from the box indicated that it was still working. This was the intergalactic communicator. Naturally, Kurlad's communicator was nothing like the cheap stuff developed by the Six Nations. According to observer guidelines, he needed to do 2 things right now. First, he had to use the communicator to get in contact with his headquarters, and second, he needed to request for help from the local civilization, the Six Nations. At this moment, buzzing sounds came from the sky, and a figure in a black mechanical suit with 2 huge wings on its back landed beside the ship. So, it does look like what I thought it would. Oh, there's a survivor. Han Xiao noticed the Godarin to the side. He was very knowledgeable and was able to tell that this was the observer suit. Han Xiao raised his eyebrows before his gaze focused on the intergalactic communicator on the Godarin's hand. This was what he was looking for. Planet Aquamarine's local. Kurlad sized him up in a glance and switched on the translator mode, allowing his own language to be translated into what Han Xiao could understand. He pointed his fingers at Han Xiao, and said, "You, tell me, what is this place?" Chapter 306, Explosion. In the clairvoyant view of Destiny's Child, it could never show the details on whether a person lived or died. Han Xiao had originally decided to first get to the crash site of the spaceship and steal the intergalactic communication device. This device was the most important factor to leave the planet. The spaceship was never the target. As it turned out, the device was still in the investigator's possession, so the original plan would not work. He had to think of a new way to deal with the investigator. Han Xiao thought quickly. Do I rob or swindle him? Seeing that Han Xiao still had not replied after some time, Kurlad frowned and said, "Hey, I asked you a question. Answer me. Are you the visitor from Godara?" Han Xiao made up his mind and slowly moved toward Kurlad. "The civilization from this planet requested help. I am the investigator responsible for the assistance." "Who are you?" When Han Xiao was within 10 meters of Kurlad, he replied, "I am the messenger of planet Aquamarine. I am here to invite you to our place." "Good. Take me to the most powerful leader in the civilization." Kurlad was surprised and dropped his suspicion. He suddenly remembered something and said, "Wait for a second, I need to report back to the people who sent me here." "No problem. Waiting is the least I can do." Kurlad was satisfied with the treatment from planet Aquamarine, and he was even more pleased with the attitude of this messenger. Just as he lowered his head and turned on the communication device, Han Xiao suddenly charged forward. The Batwing flying device suddenly activated, and Han Xiao shot forward as if he was a cobra. Han Xiao kicked right on Kurlad's body and snatched the device from his hand. Bang! The impact of the kick was powerful, and Kurlad was knocked back and crashed into 4 trees. Han Xiao put the device in his pocket and prepared for battle. He had decided to take the first step and create a momentum in the battle. If he had left the investigator alone and could not stop him from contacting the 6 nations, then his identity would be revealed. More importantly, there would be no place for Han Xiao to do anything if Kurlad talked to the 6 nations. Therefore, the only choice that he had was to take action. There was actually another way, where Han Xiao acted like he was a man from an advanced civilization that had ended up stranded on planet Aquamarine. He could borrow the communication device to call for help, and the best case scenario was that the Godaran would be willing to help, but chances for that were slim. It would be more likely that the Godaran would raise their suspicion and become alert. Knowing that the other party was from an advanced civilization rather than an uncivilized one, the investigator would hold a different attitude, and the chances of successful sneak attacks would be lower. Moreover, using the identity of an advanced civilization was not always beneficial. Godara was one of the most powerful civilizations in the entire galaxy. There was no reason for them to help him. Even if Han Xiao was willing to offer money, Kurlad could still contact the 6 nations to get resources. So, it was possible that they would not help Han Xiao. The most likely scenario was that Godaran would have bad intentions. Was it not a freebie to kill a wanderer without any backup? With only a few seconds to think, Han Xiao had decided to directly use brute force and rob the device. Not only that, he also came up with a new plan. First, he had to stop Kurlad from talking to the 6 nations. On the receiving end of the attack, Kurlad slowly got up without any injury. The battle suit was still releasing a golden glow, which was the shield embedded in the suit. Kurlad's expression was cold, and he took the 2 small golden balls that were attached to his braids. The mechanical force flashed on his fingertips, and the small ball expanded. One ball became a golden shield, while the other ball turned into golden spear. The appearance was old-fashioned, but one could feel the energy embedded in the weapon, showing that they were not ordinary weapons. "You uncultured swine, you've made a big mistake." The transformation from the golden ball to a weapon was a mechanic skill. Advanced civilizations basically had the skill in hand, and it was clear that Godara had better equipment. Kurlad was a LV-63 mechanical pugilist. Pure-blooded Godarans had much higher attributes compared to humans. His attributes were not lower than the LV-60 pugilist on planet Aquamarine, and with advanced equipment, his power points were around 3000 Ona, a Class C super. Just from the power points, he was stronger than all the LV-60 superhumans on planet Aquamarine. But he did not surpass Han Xiao. The battle erupted. Han Xiao spread out his wings, and the 4 machine guns on the wings fired rapidly. Kurlad raised his shield, and the shield released a larger circular light shield on top of it. Ding ding dang dang. All the bullets were reflected by the light shield. Kurlad roared with anger and pointed his spear right at Han Xiao. The head of a spear suddenly fired a golden bullet in an arrow shape. Han Xiao jumped in an instant, and the bullet passed right by his feet. The bullet left clear holes in the trees that were on its path and disappeared into the distance. Godaran craftsmanship combined technology and magic, so it was not an ordinary weapon that was based on technology. Instead, its power was stronger than normal explosive powder, where one light bullet could take out 500 armor points. The damage was extremely high. Han Xiao hovered in midair and used the sniper to kite the enemy. However, all the electromagnetic bullets were blocked off by the shield. At the same time, Kurlad pulled off another golden ball, which formed a weird gun that was the size of half of the body and fired into the sky. Hong! A bright red beam shot out of the barrel. Han Xiao tried to dodge it, but he still got tagged by the edge of the beam, and the armor points dropped by 300. The mechanic class clearly showed the power of having a better equipment and weapons. Kurlad was supposed to be an enemy from version 2.0, so it was natural that one felt his damage was too high. Even though investigators were not famous for their combat skills, Kurlad was different. He had great confidence in his combat abilities, and he thought that he could suppress anyone from the lower civilization with just his equipment alone. Kurlad had the sense of pride as a part of a higher civilization, and he did not put planet Aquamarine in his eyes. He did not understand why Han Xiao attacked, but a lower species trying to challenge him was just to ask for death. He wanted Han Xiao to understand the position that he was in. Han Xiao remained calm. It was not the first time that he had fought someone stronger than him. Even though Kurlad had good equipment and attributes, but he was still an elite model, so the skills and abilities were all normal. This is probably the first time I fought with a space soldier. His ranged attack is stronger than mine. I need to try and get close. Han Xiao instantly adapted his plan and dove down onto the enemy. 4 sonic spheres flew and exploded around Kurlad. Kurlad's shield was affected by the attack, meaning that the attack was stable. Kurlad counter-attacked with his spear. Han Xiao also used a basic shield made out of electromagnetic field and blocked the attack. The sparks dance around the friction between Han Xiao's electromagnetic blades and Kurlad's shield. Bang bang bang. Punches and kicks with huge bursts of energy landed on Kurlad's body. The shield was heavily weakened, and the suit was also heavily damaged. Even though close-quarter combat was advantageous for a mechanical pugilist, Han Xiao had a variety of skills and abilities that overwhelmed Kurlad. The two men did not rest for a second, and the battlefield was soon moved away from the spaceship crash site and into a forest. Even though the Godaran investigator had the advantage in equipment, Han Xiao's attacks were too complex and unpredictable. Kurlad could not hold back the attacks as he got more and more frustrated. Sonic Sphere Penetrate again released a penetrating sound wave. The shield flickered, and the energy was finally exhausted. He's so hard to deal with. As Kurlad realized the danger that he was in, he intentionally left an opening and used his suit to take a direct hit from Han Xiao. The light of suit dimmed again, but Kurlad had the chance to open up another ball. It turned into a battle axe, which was the weapon that had the highest damage. He had decided to end this battle. The axe exploded in light like burning sun, and Kurlad whirled it in the air and chopped down. Hong! The earth cracked, and the impact wave exploded onto the side. The suit showed another ferocious crack, and the armor points dropped again. One more. Kurlad roared. He took a step back, used another skill as his body shined, and attacked again. The signal of danger was imminent and deadly. The air pressure was landing at extremely high speed. Nice. Han Xiao was happy instead of being afraid. He quickly activated the skill that he had saved up. Aftershock, Death Thorns. Dang. The battle axe flew away, and Kurlad fell to the ground on his knees as his hands were covered in his own blood. The maxed out skill Aftershock, Death Thorns could return 50% of close combat damage, which broke through Kurlad's armor and dealt actual damage. The sonic spheres again landed on the enemy, and Kurlad was knocked away. However, the shield on his suit was still active. You are strong. I did not think that this planet had people who are this strong. Kurlad tried to catch his breath. He stood up again and took another 2 balls, which turned into another shield and a long sword. But choosing to fight me was your biggest mistake. My equipment is so much stronger than yours. You are a strong fighter, so I will kill you with honor. Han Xiao stopped moving and shook his head. Man, I didn't want to do this. Before Kurlad realized what was going on, Han Xiao's energy power boosted at an insane rate. The thick and strong mechanical force covered the mechanical suit, as if it was a lightning snake crawling on his body. The energy core of the mechanical suit was so bright that it hurt Kurlad's eyes. At the same time, a shadow of a man wearing a black mask appeared behind Han Xiao. Mechanical skill Snake, Devil, energy core overloads, attributes buff increases. All modules have no cost. Duration of status, 2 to 7 minutes. Cooldown, 7 days. Character summon card, Germinal Organization Leader Combo Penetration, for the next 8 seconds, all skills deal critical true damage, ignoring all armor. The target's defense status will also decrease by 24%, lasting 5 minutes. Usage, 1/12. And also, Flaming Will. Overload. Surging Mechanical Force. Bang 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 bang. The tsunami of attacks washed over the frightened face of Kurlad. Chapter 307, Alien Captive. The sound of the explosions came continuously from where the spaceship had crashed. Huang Jian rubbed his hands and exhaled, worried. Sounds like a battle, but who is he fighting? Huang Jian was confused. In this unpopulated wilderness, was Han Xiao fighting with an alien? Even the thought of it made him think that it was such a crazy world. After a while, the sound disappeared, and Huang Jian worried even more. Although he had heard of how strong Han Xiao was, the enemy was an alien after all. If anything happens to him, there won't be anyone giving me orders. Should I continue to wait or? Just as he was in a dilemma, an outline of a person flew in his direction from the place where the spaceship crashed and approached very quickly. It was Han Xian, and he landed near the helicopter. Some parts of his mechanical suit had even cracked, exposing the wires inside, sparkling with electricity. Great, you're okay. Huang Jian heaved a sigh of relief. Suddenly, he saw that Han Xiao had brought along a being of a species that he had never seen before, and its feet and hands were locked by electrical handcuffs. That was Kurlad, who had multiple bruises on his face and was naked. Ali, Huang Jian stuttered and pointed at Kurlad in shock, unable to say a complete word. An alien, took me quite some effort to capture him. Han Xiao grabbed Kurlad by his hair and stuffed him into the cabin. This Godarin's face was filled with rage, but his mouth was blocked, so he could not say anything. Huang Jian was stunned. He knew that Han Xiao was strong, but he did not know that Han Xiao was so strong that he could even capture an alien. His knowledge of Han Xiao was refreshed. Fly the helicopter quickly. This place is close to Raylan's border, so their people will be here very soon, Han Xiao said. Huang Jian started flying the helicopter hastily, and they departed. Han Xiao took off the mechanical suit on the helicopter and checked its damage. The armor was only at 20%. The Godara investigator's equipment was much more advanced, however, his last burst had made Kurlad unable to fight back at all. All Kurlad could do was lie there and take it. He destroyed the investigator's suit, seized the tiny golden ball, made sure that Kurlad would not be able to touch any weapon, and only left him with a translator to make fooling him easier, no, to make communicating with him easier. He got the communicator and a Godarin. The result was better than expected. I can still get quite a number of things from him. I shall deal with him after getting back. Han Xiao thought on the new plan. Huang Jian was very curious about the alien, and he kept turning back. Your Excellency, does he bite? He, a high civilization investigator, was being looked down on by a native as a savage beast. Kurlad was furious, but his limbs were all tied, so he could only express his protests by knocking his head on the metal plate strongly. I don't think he bites, Han Xiao touched his chin and said with a low voice, but seeing that he's so furious, maybe he has such twisted interests. Bang. Bang. Kurlad continued knocking his head on the metal plate. Is he edible? Huang Jian asked curiously. Han Xiao pinched the Godarin's arms and said, the skin is quite smooth, and the meat is rather solid. Are you interested? Huang Jian hesitated, then nodded and said, I have never eaten an alien before. Boom boom boom. The frequency of head knocking on the metal plate became higher. Underdeveloped. Savages. Kurlad growled in his heart, then a tint of fear appeared in his mind. Do these natives really want to eat me? Huang Jian was very interested and asked questions one after another, wanting to understand how Han Xiao knew an alien would arrive on planet Aquamarine and why he captured the alien. Incidentally, Kurlad wanted to know the answer to these questions as well. First, the spaceship malfunctioned and was barely crash-landed, then came this strong guy in a mechanical suit, saying that he was there to welcome him. However, this representative sneak attacked him, beat him up, and bound him. Thinking that the analysis panel's danger evaluation to planet Aquamarine was low, Kurlad was in a rage. How long has it been since the database was last updated? How is this not dangerous? Besides, who is he? Why did he capture me? How did he know I crash-landed here? Kurlot could not figure it out, and of course, Han Xiao was not saying anything. Is it a male or female? Huang Jian was curious. Check it yourself, Han Xiao said with a weird expression. Huang Jian opened his eyes wide and looked for a while, then said in surprise, I thought that since this alien's build is so huge, it should be huge too. Boom. Kurlot could not take the humiliation anymore and used all his strength to bang his head against the metal plate, knocking himself unconscious. More than 10 minutes after the helicopter left, Raylan's troops arrived late at the scene, found the crashed spaceship, and immediately locked the area down in shock. This is a spaceship from outer space. According to the orders from above, this is a spaceship from the friendly Godaran civilization that was specifically sent to help us investigate the Inhumans. Even the mountain peak was destroyed. This was not a usual landing, and the spaceship wrecked. Check for survivors immediately. Report, no corpses were discovered in the spaceship. There are traces of a battle here. Raylan's troops collected clues, observed the battlefield, and reached their first conclusion. 2 people fought each other, both superhumans. One of them used weapons unknown to us. The marks on these trees seem like they were melted through by laser beams. The slash marks are extremely smooth, they were not caused by ordinary cold weapons. These battle traces have comparatively higher radiation levels, so this should be the Godaran. The other party used firearms, the metal construction of the bullet shells is similar to ours. There are also some armor shards in the ground, so this should be someone very strong in our planet. The actual person needs to be further verified with the database. From the destruction level of the scene, this person's strength is definitely at the top of planet Aquamarine, and there are very limited people in this category. The person should be identified within a short period. The result of the battle was most likely that the Godaran was captured and taken away. Are there any other discoveries? At this time, a researcher noticed that the spaceship's armor was open, and inside were the internal parts of the spaceship. He looked inside curiously, and as he was using the torchlight, he suddenly found something special. The researcher said, there seemed to be liquid in the spaceship. Liquid. The crowd surrounded the area. With the strong light shining in, they found a pile of metal and pipes covered in black, sticky liquid. What is that? Probably fuel. At this time, the officer suddenly said, orders from above, transport the spaceship back to the nation secretly. The accident that happened to the Godara spaceship was a once-in-a-blue-moon chance for the planet Aquamarine regimes, so Raylan decided to research on the technology of the spaceship. Since they were behind the other civilizations, they had to grab any chance to develop themselves. The hope of prospering only appeared when there were risks. Of course, Raylan did not want to anger the Godaran civilization, so they would report this to the Godaran civilization, but they were going to delay it for some time, acting oblivious to the situation. Raylan took this very seriously. They were determined to prevent news of the incident from spreading, and they wanted to have the spaceship exclusively to themselves. About the missing Godaran, Raylan decided to search in secret. The engineering team soon arrived. They dug out the spaceship, covered it in black cloth, and used 3 transporting helicopters to move it into Raylan's territory. Chapter 308, Deal. Being back at the sanctuary, Han Xiao locked Kurlot in his secret base, then checked his battle trophies. Godara Battle Spear, Supermodel. Type, highly compressed cold weapon plus light element enhanced. Quality, green. Basic stats, melee damage 247 to 255, range damage 294 to 381. Power output, 346. Requirements, above LV 50, above 1500 energy. Length, 1.7 m. Weight, 37 pounds. Energy source, LV.3 magic engraving. Made in, Godara Military Satellite 7, Dawn Military Workshop, number 248 Assembly Line. Product serial number PV1324. Ability, Golden Thrust. Activates energy engravings and releases magic bullets from the tip of the spear. Energy usage, 5 per shot. Cooldown, 11s after every 20 shots. Ability, Godara Slash. Using 10 energy, releases an arc light blade, plus 240% attack area of next slash, plus 60% damage, deals splash damage. Cooldown, 8.6s. Additional effect, magic affinity using Mi Gold as the material, plus 12% magic resistance. Additional effect, portable compressing can be compressed into a gold sphere. Remarks, Godara crafted weapon, made with me gold, has light element blessing and high compressing technology. A product made from the combination of vintage aesthetics and advanced technology, of magic and technology, it is usable in both melee and ranged battles. It is common equipment in Godaran civilization. These small golden spheres were assembly line products, standard equipment for an investigator, and not made by Kurlad himself. He was a standard galactic warrior. Plus, mechanical pugilists were more focused on fighting, so their building abilities were very low. All 7 golden spheres were products of technology and magic. The basic damage was 2 to 3 times higher than usual gunpowder firearms, and with the enhancements from mechanic abilities, the difference would be even larger. The standard equipment for high civilizations could be roughly divided into 2 types, normal models and supermodels. Stronger beings could use strong weapons with higher requirements and make better use of their energy, whereas normal models were equivalent to gray quality. The supermodels referred to those with superpowers, like superhumans. However, naturally, not every being in the universe was a human, thus, super was used as a catch-all term. Magic knowledge is not compatible with me, I can't reverse engineer the building process of this equipment. In the case of the normal path of pure machinery, after the gunpowder firearms should be the electromagnetic energy firearms, and the basic attributes of those are about the same level as this. Han Xiao nodded. The strength of standard equipment of civilizations was an indirect indication of that civilization's strength. Godara was a galactic civilization, and compared to the entire galaxy, its civilization level was in the middle. However, in the eyes of planet Aquamarine people, any civilization able to travel in the galaxy was an advanced civilization. If players wanted to build mixed equipment with combined technology, it would require different classes working together, a mechanic building the basic structures and a mage giving blessings. There were also some restrictions on the details. This was the first batch of galactic equipment that Han Xiao had acquired, and his favorite was that firearm that could shoot a beam cannon, which had a very magical name, Wrath of Gareth. Its range was 600 meters, and its basic damage was an astonishing 500. It could temporarily replace the Ghost Sniper rifle, becoming the best weapon to use with Flaming Will. However, the most important thing about a mechanic was the machinery they made themselves. Only these could be considered as regular equipment. Han Xiao was very clear of this fact, and these new weapons could only be used during his transition into the galaxy. After putting away the equipment, Han Xiao took out the galactic communicator. His face turned serious in the face of the key item. At this time, Kurlad, who had been tossed and left in the corner, secretly opened his eyes. Seeing that Han Xiao was looking at the galactic communicator, his lips warped into a sneer. Although he had become a prisoner, Kurlad still held onto his sense of superiority. He was sure that this planet Aquamarine native would not be able to use the communicator. In his eyes, Han Xiao was like a monkey getting its new toy. A thought appeared in his mind, and Kurlad suddenly felt energetic. He doesn't know how to use any of this equipment, which means he will definitely ask me about to use them. Maybe I can trick him into sending a rescue signal to the headquarters without him knowing. Kurlad felt this plan could work, and he became excited as he saw hope. At this time, Han Xiao easily brought up the translucent crystal screen of the communicator, looked at the screen full of Godara words, chose the option to switch language instantly, and changed it into planet Aquamarine's language. Back then, when Godarans first came in contact with planet Aquamarine, they had keyed the planet Aquamarine language into the database. This was one of the things that had to be done when they discovered a new civilization. Only then could they analyze the language for ease of communication. The galactic communicator was a necessity for galactic travel. Every player in his previous life used it before, and Han Xiao was so familiar with it that he could even operate it with his eyes closed. He easily brought up the login interface for a personal account, turned to look at the stunned Kurlad, and said casually, "Kurlad, right? Good that you're awake. Now, tell me your personal account. How can you possibly know how to use the communicator? And about personal accounts? Who are you?" Kurlad's eyes were filled with disbelief. He could almost not make sense of his words and was terrified. How could a native know about these things? There was only one explanation for this: this guy is definitely not a native. He came from the galaxy as well. Thinking of this, Kurlad's sense of superiority was nowhere to be found anymore. He was stunned and confused. Originally, he had planned to threaten the man with the name of Godara, but it would only be useful against a native. People in the galaxy would not be afraid of such a vague threat at all. With the distance and peace treaty limitations, this method would not work at all. Furthermore, he was just a little investigator, not anyone in a high position. Who am I? Han Xiao raised the corner of his lips and said deliberately mysteriously, our meeting was rushed. Please, allow me to officially introduce myself. My name is Han Xiao. There's nothing else you need to know. Kurlad was more convinced of his guess and felt that Han Xiao was very mysterious. He looked Han Xiao in his eyes and saw an abyss filled with mist. Suddenly, it occurred to him, and he yelled, wait a minute, how did you know my name? You are a Godaran investigator, ordered to investigate the so-called Inhumans in planet Aquamarine, Han Xiao said slowly. Due to unknown reasons, your spaceship met an accident. Are you a mind reader or foreseer? Kurlad said with a cautious expression. He discreetly used his energy to protect his mind, however, he did not discover any traces of it being invaded. Guess, Han Xiao said mockingly. This attitude made Kurlad grind his teeth, but he had no choice under such circumstances. He held his anger and asked, why did you attack me? Han Xiao pointed at the communicator and said, don't worry, this is not personal. I also am not hostile toward Godara. All I want is this. You call this not hostile? Kurlad tried to pull away from the mechanical chains in rage. Han Xiao sat on the sofa, placed his hands on his knees, leaned toward the Godaran with a pressurizing look, and said coldly, if I was hostile, you would already be dead. You just think I am still useful to you, Kurlad said with abhorrence. Correct answer, no reward. Han Xiao smiled. I just need the communicator to contact Galactic Travel Agency and leave this planet. We cannot be considered enemies. The crash of your spaceship had nothing to do with me, and attacking you was just to prevent accidents. I know about Godaran's arrogance full well, and we can only have a proper talk after I defeat you. Now, I have a deal I want to talk to you about. Of course, you are in no place to reject. Kurlad clenched his teeth and said, go ahead. I need to borrow the money in your personal account. If you are willing to cooperate, I can let you go and bring you to leave with me. At that time, you can return home if you like. Kurlad was surprised. You're willing to let me go? Why not? Han Xiao laughed. I have no grudge with or hatred toward Godara, I'm just robbing you of your money, not your life. I didn't really hurt you. Or is it that, because I defeated you, you are holding grudges and want revenge? Kurlad thought carefully. Indeed, Han Xiao's direct conflict with him was only their fight. Although he had lost, Han Xiao did not hurt him severely and even gave him a chance to return home. Godara had the old tradition of admiring the strong, and he was an investigator, so fighting was normal. Although he was still quite upset, Kurlad's rage gradually cooled down. After pondering, he said with dignity, as long as you fulfill your part of the deal, I am willing to cooperate. I can promise in the name of God Gal that I will never seek revenge, I admit my defeat. God Gal was the religious god of Godara, so this kind of promise was very solemn. Chapter 309, Already. Clank. The heavy chains fell onto the ground. Kurlad heaved a sigh of relief, moved his limbs around, and awkwardly looked down on his nude body. Can I? A set of clothes were thrown toward him. Kurlad shoved them on hastily, being naked would have humiliated anyone. Han Xiao stared at Kurlad with a smile the whole time. Kurlad's personal account had galactic general currency. Calling the Galactic Travel Agency needed money, and since Han Xiao was unsure if they would accept resources as payment, getting the general currency was insurance. Furthermore, he indeed did not want to kill Kurlad. Although he had the upper hand now, Godara definitely knew that an investigator had come to planet Aquamarine, gotten into an accident, and lost contact. Thus, they would contact 6 nations at some point or even send out new investigator team. The truth would always be revealed. If he killed Kurlad, the conflict would only get more intense, and there was no need for that. Letting Kurlad live meant that the personal conflict would not become a bigger one. Investigators often met a bit of danger, as long he did not die, Godara would definitely not bother as such small conflict was nothing. Of course, although Kurlad had made a promise, Han Xiao did not trust him completely. At least he would not let Kurlad out of his sight in planet Aquamarine and would not return any of his equipment to him. Because of him acting mysterious, Kurlad assumed that Han Xiao came from the galaxy as well, so he would not dare to make a move easily unknown of his identity. As expected, Kurlot asked again, "Who are you really?" "Galactic human," Han Xiao said with perfunctory. The human race in the galaxy was a very large species, and there were countless branches. Kurlot observed that Han Xiao seemed to be the most common type of galaxy human race. Not being able to identify Han Xiao's origins, he scratched his head and said, "Okay, I will not ask again. When are you planning to leave?" "I want to go home soon." "Not too long." Han Xiao planned to bring the pro players from the planet Aquamarine division away. The divisions would soon end, he could wait. "By the way," Kurlot suddenly said, "where's my spaceship?" "Someone took it away, probably without the intention of returning it to you." Han Xiao knew full well what had happened after. He knew that Raylan locked down the information just from the fact that there was no intelligence about the crashed spaceship from the intelligence agents in the dark net. It was clear what Raylan wanted to do. Kurlot was upset and did not think about contacting the Six Nations at this time. The current situation did not favor him, so he did not want to take the risk. Furthermore, he felt that he had more to say to Han Xiao, who also came from the galaxy like him, and communicating with him would be easier than with the natives. "What malfunction did your spaceship have?" Han Xiao asked. "I don't know either. It was flying normally and perfectly under stealth mode, and when approaching planet Aquamarine, the engine suddenly stopped working. Although the observer spaceship isn't big, it was very stable. I have no idea why it would suddenly malfunction." Han Xiao thought about it before shaking his head. He started to get down to business. He turned on the communicator and registered for a personal account. The communicator also worked as a personal terminal. Its personal account functions were very rich and had a bank transfer function, the most common way of making a deal in the galaxy, quick and convenient. Every big civilization had their own galactic bank, among which, the most authorized and powerful ones were the three universal civilization banks, of course. The banks worked with each other, and they could be used anywhere in the galaxy. Han Xiao picked one randomly and told Kurlot to make the transfer. Ding. "Your account has been transferred 878 in as." A pleasant-sounding female voice appeared from the terminal. "Only this much money? You're too poor." Han Xiao could not help but complain. Inez was the general currency in the galaxy, the most common currency unit used. Kurlot's face turned red, and he said, "I don't have the habit of saving. Being an investigator is a tough job, and I need to enjoy myself." "Wait a minute, why am I explaining myself to you?" He suddenly realized that he was being robbed. Why did he even have to feel ashamed of having little money? Having received the money, Han Xiao's target was achieved, and he felt assured. Counting the days, the planet Aquamarine divisions would last for about more than 10 days, and he planned to use that time to contact the Galactic Travel Agency in advance. There were thousands of channels in the communicator. Han Xiao looked through and entered Garden Galaxy Travel Agency channel. A dense list of traveling routes appeared on the screen, and a cold electrical voice appeared. "Is filtering required?" "Yes." "Location?" "Star Zone 9, Planet Aquamarine." "Destination?" Han Xiao paused then said, "Ube Early Hub." "Please select price range." "Cheapest." Han Xiao gave Kurlot the cheapskate a stare. "Number of travelers?" "A few dozen." "Race?" "Human." "Have you used the Galactic Travel Agency before?" "Yes." After more than 20 questions, the result was finally filtered down, leaving only 5 traveling agencies. The Galactic Travel Agency was a very large industry, and many large organizations provided the service. This was one of the cheapest ways for galactic travel, like a private hire, or more accurately, a public spaceship. Han Xiao chose the Shorthorn Star Travel Agency as this was a galactic travel agency with a very good name. After choosing, the communicator transferred the communication channel into the Shorthorn Star salesperson channel, letting both parties discuss the details. "Greetings, thank you for choosing Shorthorn Star. We will provide you the best high quality and inexpensive services." The salesperson was a beautiful human female. According to the race of the customer, they would be assigned to salespersons meeting their standard of beauty. After the saleswoman finished her welcoming opening, she said, "We have received your travel requirements. Fortunately, a whale spaceship will pass by Star Zone 9 in 20 days' time. We will bring you to the ship by then. What grade of seats would you like?" We have economy class, business class, first class, VIP cabins, and even VVIP cabins. What's the price for the economy cabins? 3 Ines per person. How many seats would you like to reserve? Han Xiao quickly counted before saying, 50. Bringing about 50 of high-skill players in the top places should be enough. Bringing some players was a very important part of the plan. Han Xiao then paid the deposit and confirmed the boarding time, nodding in his mind. The preparation of heading into the galaxy could be considered completed. His destination was Ubairli Hub, a transfer station in Garden Galaxy with accessible and convenient transportations. Various races of the Colton group gathered there, and there were many opportunities. In Han Xiao's plan, the Ubairli Hub was the most suitable to be his first station of entering the galaxy. Now, I just have to wait for the players to finish the competition. I will then make an announcement, and the team will be created. It's all ready. There were some matters in Planet Aquamarine that he had to deal with before leaving. For a few days in a row, Han Xiao transferred his resources secretly and brought Kurlot along all the time. He made him wear a cape covering his skin. They occasionally appeared before people in the sanctuary, raising some curiosity and shock as to why there was suddenly a mysterious man alongside Han Xiao. During the battle between the top 8 to decide top 4 in the singles, Frenzied Sword met Li Ji. Frenzied Sword, who everyone expected to lose before the match, gave an astonishing performance. After 5 tough battles, he beat Li Ji by 1 round. This time, Frenzied Sword expressed what a mechanical pugilist was fully capable of and finally showcased something he had been hiding, his energy warhammer. Its explosive power was even stronger than a pugilist, helping him to break through Li Ji's combos. Frenzied Sword entered top 4 singles, and the haters suddenly all disappeared. The victory was the best confidence boost, his China's best mechanical pugilist nickname in the forums became more popular. He was considered the black horse of the first season. Li Ji did not think that he would lose to Frenzied Sword, and unfortunate things did not come alone. The Temple of God entered the top 4 teams, meeting Long Sky. This time, Hao Tian gave his all. He cleansed himself of his previous shame, defeated Temple of God, and entered the finals of the groups. The situation became clear. Long Sky and Dynasty would fight for the division's champions and runner-up. Temple of God could only fight for second runner-up with another team. As for the singles, if things went smoothly, Frenzied Sword could very possibly enter the top 3, and he had a very high chance of entering the internationals. As for the champion, not that Han Xiao looked down on Frenzied Sword, but Dynasty's King Admiral was way too strong. His skills, control, and attributes were almost undefeatable in version 1.0. Dynasty seemed to have the momentum of becoming the champion, the media favored them. Even so, Frenzied Sword's achievements and popularity were way better than what he had boasted in Han Xiao's previous life. It had definitely been worthwhile cultivating him. The divisions lasted for about half a year. The batch of players with the highest level already reached an average level of the limit LV60. As Han Xiao was doing his preparation discreetly, Bennett suddenly called him. I have arrived at Sanctuary 3. Where are you? Why are you suddenly here? Han Xiao said jokingly. Missed me? What do you think? Bennett said with a very serious tone. Where did you hide that alien? You didn't eat him, did you? Han Xiao's smile disappeared, and he frowned. Did Huang Jian expose it? Talk when we meet. You're in big trouble this time again. Bennett said with a low voice, but there was not much blame in his tone. He was already used to having trouble drop from the sky. Chapter 310, Raylan's Message. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. In the high tower of Sanctuary 3, Bennett stood behind the window with hands behind his back and looked down on the players in the square with deep and mysterious emotions in his eyes. The door was pushed open. Han Xiao walked in, and Bennett asked with a serious expression, is that alien still alive? Han Xiao stepped aside, and Kurlot walked in as well. Bennett's pupils constricted, this was the first time that he had seen an alien, so he could not help but stare, forgetting himself. Native, what are you looking at? Kurlot said unhappily. He speaks our language. Bennett said with surprise. Han Xiao pointed at the translator and explained it to Bennett, only then did Bennett understand. Aliens' technology is indeed advanced, Bennett commented. He looked at the two of them and said in confusion, didn't you capture him? Why does it look like? We have agreed on some matters. Han Xiao did not want Kurlat to hear their following conversation, so he took off his translator. How did you know about the alien? Han Xiao asked. Bennett shook his head and said in a low voice, Raylan told me, or else I wouldn't have known an alien came. They investigated you, confirmed that you captured the alien, and contacted me discreetly to demand that you to give them the alien. Han Xiao was not surprised that it was Raylan. Following the traces at that time, they would indeed investigate him. Besides, he had never planned to hide it because there was no need to. And what if I reject? Their official response was violent methods will be unavoidable. Raylan is very firm this time. Not only was Han Xiao one of the biggest contributors to the fall of the Germinal organization, but he was also the strongest superhuman in planet Aquamarine. So, the 6 nations respected him. However, Raylan had made up their mind this time and had a very strong attitude. They were not preparing to give him face and wanted to force Han Xiao to give up the Godaran and control him. Han Xiao inwardly shook his head. Raylan's hostility meant nothing to him anymore. Bennett was very speechless. Can you tell me, how did you kidnap an alien back after a casual walk outside? What do you want to do? Han Xiao sat down, looked at Bennett, and said, I'm planning to leave planet Aquamarine. Bennett was completely stunned. This message was way too sudden. Bennett only regained his focus after a while and asked with surprise, why? Are you really an alien? Compared to the galaxy, planet Aquamarine is just a tiny rural place. The world is so large, and I want to explore it. Han Xiao smiled. Turns out this was the reason for the capture the alien. Bennett adjusted his mindset very quickly. He had seen a lot of things. After all, he said with some sadness, you are a friend who shares the same ideals as me. If you've really decided that, I can only wish you all the best. I will miss you. Han Xiao looked him in the eye and smiled. That's a wider world, aren't you tempted? Do you want to come with me? Bennett's mind drifted away a little. It was like he saw the endless galaxy in Han Xiao's eyes. Men's romance was the sea of stars, and one could only look further by standing taller. His heart started beating faster, the desire for exploration in his heart became stronger. However, Bennett calmed down very quickly. He shook his head and said, the sanctuary is my ideal. Sorry, I need to continue it. Han Xiao hesitated and said, there's actually another reason. A disaster will sweep over planet Aquamarine in 2 to 3 years' time, I foresaw it. It's a horrifying disaster, and there's a very low chance of surviving. Are you really not leaving? Han Xiao decided to warn Bennett about the arrival of the mutation disaster. After all, Bennett had treated him well. It was dangerous staying in planet Aquamarine, and Han Xiao wanted to enter the galaxy before version 1.0. One of the main goals that he had was to avoid the first and most dangerous wave of disaster when the mutation disaster arrived in planet Aquamarine. With the possible identity of a foreseer, Han Xiao's foresight had reasons to be believed. However, after Bennett listened carefully to Han Xiao's rough description of the disaster, his hesitation disappeared completely, and he said, then I categorically have to stay, this is my home, and she needs me. Han Xiao stared at Bennett for a while before letting out a long sigh. Indeed, that's the type of person you are. People's beliefs differed and could not be forced. Bennett stared at Han Xiao with complicated emotions in his eyes and asked, are you leaving to avoid the danger? Han Xiao smiled and said, the solution to the disaster is hidden in the galaxy. Not only am I avoiding danger, but I am also looking for the solution in the galaxy. He did not lie to Bennett. Solving the mutation disaster in version 2.0 in advance was part of his plan. If he could change the storyline of planet Aquamarine in version 2.0, he would definitely gain some legendary points. Hearing this, Bennett smiled and said, I was not wrong about you. When I heard your speech back then, I knew we are the same type of people. We are not. Han Xiao's lips twitched. That speech had been completely copied from Bennett's original words in his previous life. The last time that Han Xiao had gone to look for Bennett in Sanctuary 1, he had seen the speech hung in Bennett's office and was specified that the original author was Han Xiao, showing Bennett's admiration to the speech, and that had been a little awkward for Han Xiao. Anyway, although their motive was different, their goal was the same, so the motives would not matter. Since Bennett knew about Han Xiao's thoughts, he completely left Raylan's demands behind. How are you going to leave planet Aquamarine? I have already made the arrangements. You will know by then. Seeing that Han Xiao did not want to give the details, Bennett held back his curiosity and said, "If you leave, Sanctuary 3 will need to elect a new person in charge. Do you have anyone to recommend?" Han Xiao pondered and said, "Huan Yu. He has been dealing with all the daily matters in the sanctuary, and he is very familiar of the situation here. It will be most suitable for him to take over." Through the influence of the Pro League, the player's main city impression of Sanctuary 3 was complete. Even if Han Xiao left, the Sanctuary's position would not be affected. Sanctuary 3 had his name in it, and every player arriving at the place would be reminded of him. However, the Sanctuary players would not be able to enjoy all of his functions, which might cause the Sanctuary to lose some of its popularity. Han Xiao suddenly had a new thought. Maybe there's a way to continue strengthening the influence of the Sanctuary even after I leave the planet. Since he had already told Bennett about the mutation disaster, this foresight should be able to make more impact. Han Xiao gave it a slight thought and came up with a plan, memorizing it in his heart. Bennett agreed that Huan Yu was a suitable candidate as well. Suddenly, Bennett said with a serious tone, "There are too many Inhumans in Sanctuary 3, even more than the refugees. They're taking up too much space. They have unknown origins and are too mysterious. This is a potential security threat. I don't know how you make them work for you, but if you leave, what are we going to do with them? When the disaster is upon us, the Inhumans will most likely be the pillar of Sanctuary's protection. Don't be too strict toward them, accept and include them." As the players grew, the various organizations in Planet Aquamarine feared Inhumans more and more, and naturally, Bennett was not an exception. He had to convince Bennett to make sure that his achievements in Planet Aquamarine would not be destroyed. Upon hearing this, Bennett's expression changed. "If that's the case, I will take it very seriously." Although he feared the Inhumans, he changed his attitude immediately upon knowing that the Inhumans could protect the Sanctuary. This reasoning was very effective on him. The two of them chatted for a while, then Bennett stood up and said his goodbyes. He had come to deal with Raylan's message but unexpectedly heard about Han Xiao plans. In this case, Raylan's warning would not be worrying at all. On the other hand, the disaster that Han Xiao had told him about gave him a heavy heart. It felt like there was a dark cloud above the path in front of him. He decided to immediately return and write the crisis protocols, strengthen the Sanctuary's protection, and speed up the plan. Bennett was sad to see a partner like Han Xiao go, so he said sincerely, "I wish you all the best, and I hope that we can meet again one day." Han Xiao reached out to give Bennett a firm handshake. They smiled at each other. Bennett's arrival reminded Han Xiao that he should notify some of his friends. Hyla and Aurora had stayed in the sanctuary because of him, so he decided to tell them about it first. On that same night, under the clear sky and sleepy winter, he summoned Hyla and Aurora to tell them that he was going into the galaxy soon. As expected, they were surprised, and their faces were filled with disbelief. "Han Xiao, what is the galaxy like? Have you met an alien?" Aurora asked hurriedly. During these days, Aurora had been resting in the sanctuary and regained health. Han Xiao also corrected what she called him. He was finally not called an uncle. Han Xiao asked Kurlod to come closer and said, "This is an alien." Aurora's eyes were filled with curiosity. "Aliens look quite similar to us. Does he bite?" This question again. "Can't you natives be more knowledgeable?" Kurlod could not take it anymore and yelled at Aurora, "I don't." "Pa!" Kurlod fell onto the ground with his face down. Han Xiao put his hands down and said hastily, "Be kinder to kids." "Aliens are so scary," Aurora mumbled softly. Hyla pointed at Han Xiao with an expressionless face and said, "He's obviously scarier." Chapter 311, Could It Be That I'm Not Charming? Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. Lying beside Aurora lazily, Bear Cub suddenly stood up and growled at Kurlod as a warning. Han Xiao had made Aurora raise Bear Cub for a long time, and this bear had already grown to the height of half a human. It was reaching its youth stage and had developed a strange mutation with characteristics that it should not normally have. Its hair glowed lightly, and its attributes seemed to be gradually growing toward an elite level. Aurora's power seemed to have a catalytic effect on life forms. Young beings could receive special growth just by staying near to her. Some time ago, Han Xiao had come to know that Aurora's Esper power was called Dawn of Life. Its potential grade was also S, just like Hyla. That had been an exciting discovery. The source of this discovery came from combat information. Of course, it was not from him attacking Aurora. He had realized that he had misunderstood how it worked. He could just let Aurora attack him. However, even after a lot of persuading, Aurora had still kept shaking her head, unwilling to attack Han Xiao. She had even been incredibly distraught, thinking that Han Xiao might have been unhappy with her for some reason. To Aurora, there were only two people in the entire world whom she was close to. One was her older sister Hyla, and the other was the person who had torn open the darkness and brought her light when she was at her lowest point, Han Xiao. Other than Hyla, Han Xiao was the only one that treated her very well. She only had these two to rely on, so she cared for Han Xiao like an older brother. After Han Xiao finally convinced her to shoot him with the excuse of testing the performance of his mechanical suit, Han Xiao got the combat information. His initial target was only Hyla, and to his very pleasant surprise, Aurora had the same level of potential. To him, it was like a buy one get one free. In the original storyline, Aurora had turned into jam, so her future achievements were unknown. This time, she had the chance to grow. Furthermore, with how much she relied on Han Xiao, she was much more dependable than her older sister. Han Xiao gave Hyla a look, signaling that they needed to talk privately, then walked to the side. Not long after, Hyla walked over, stood beside him, and frowned. "What? Do you want to leave this planet with me? Why are you inviting me?" Hyla's expression in her eyes changed a little, and she looked at Han Xiao's profile. "Not just you, your sister as well. I know that you two will never separate." Hyla looked down to consider, and after a long silence, she said slowly, "No." Han Xiao raised his brows. "I asked Bennett the same thing. It's understandable that he's not coming, but why did you reject?" "Dangerous," Hyla said. "I need to take care of my sister. It's dangerous to stay too." Hyla's expression turned serious and said, "What did you foresee again?" Han Xiao roughly described the mutation disaster and said, "The disaster will come to you sooner or later even if you stay on this planet. You and Aurora both have very high potential, so your future will definitely be in the galaxy. Even so, do you still not want to come with me?" Hylas closed her eyes and fell into contemplation. The silence continued, like the lonely moon hanging high up in the sky. After a long time, Hyla turned to Han Xiao and said softly, "No." Han Xiao looked at her meaningfully, lit a cigarette, and exhaled some smoke. "Okay then." His tone was very casual and did not show any signs of wanting to know more, which made Hyla doubtful. She frowned and said, "Do you not want to know why?" Han Xiao laughed and said, "Don't think of yourself too highly, I just asked. Whether you come or not doesn't affect me much. You won't be much of a help with the strength you have now." Hyla's eyes turned cold a little. Although she had rejected Han Xiao, feeling the man's careless attitude, she felt like she was not important to him, and it was embarrassing. This time, Han Xiao added, "This is your own choice, I won't force you to do anything under the guise of for your own good. As he was speaking, he took out a string of keys, threw them to Hyla, and said coldly, "If the darkness devours the sanctuary one day, these keys lead to my secret base. It can provide a place to hide for you. I've left the location information in my office, the laminated backside of the third drawer on the left. I'm leaving it there for you." Hyla played with the keys. Suddenly, she said, "Are you not coming back?" Han Xiao put on a half smile and said, "Do you care about that a lot?" Hyla snorted coldly, raised the keys, signaling that she would remember what he had said, and left. After she walked a few steps away, Han Xiao's voice came from behind with a light tone. "Don't die." Hyla's footsteps paused. "You too." After Hyla left, Han Xiao's smile disappeared. He threw the cigarette butt on the floor and extinguished it with his foot. From what he estimated, there was more than a 50% chance that Hyla will leave with him, but Hyla had made the other choice unexpectedly. Even after he explained the pros and cons, Hyla had still chosen to stay. Other than her sister being the reason, she might have other considerations. The personality of Hyla before she turned evil was not easy to guess. However, Han Xiao's need for Hyla at the current stage was indeed not high. The amount of help that Hyla would be to him was not much before her power matured, and she would not even be as effective as those highly skilled players. Furthermore, bringing Hyla along meant that he had to bring Aurora, and the current Aurora was even weaker and could be hurt easily. The galaxy was full of known and unknown dangers. Even though Han Xiao was familiar with galaxy, he had to be cautious. Players, on the other hand, were an extremely great help since they could revive, and Han Xiao could enjoy the freedom of acting alone without constraints. There were benefits to not bringing anyone too. Therefore, letting Hyla and Aurora stay on planet Aquamarine might even be a good choice. There were still 2 to 3 years before the mutation disaster would arrive, and these two would be able to grow in a safe environment before that. If they followed him, they would face danger very soon. Letting them grow and coming back to fetch them after the mutation disaster was not a bad thing from how Han Xiao looked at it. Even so, after being rejected twice on the bounce, Han Xiao was still rather hurt in his heart. He mumbled to himself, "Could it be that I'm not charming? It can't be." A sound came from beside him. Emerald Grass walked out from the shadow in the corner. Han Xiao had known all along that she was hiding there. He looked at her and asked, "How much did you hear?" "Everything," Emerald Grass said surprisingly. "Was everything you said true? Aren't you afraid that I'll leave after you leave as well? You exchanged me and now have no use for me, huh? You're free, but it's best for you to stay in the sanctuary. I wasn't joking about the disaster." Emerald Grass nodded with a complicated expression, turned around, and left. Han Xiao looked at her back with narrowed eyes and shook his head. The prisoners from the Bell of Death Island were new characters in version 2.0, Emerald Green being one of them, and he had gotten her out in advance. Emerald Grass was valuable given that she would invent important drugs against the mutation disaster in the future. The heart of a human was difficult to control, but he felt there was quite a high chance that Emerald Grass would stay. She valued her life and was fanatic about pharmaceutical research. With so many players in the sanctuary, it was the best place for experiments. It was attractive to Emerald Grass. Bringing 50 highly skilled players was a very important part of the plan. When the Pro League finished and the players were still unsatisfied, it would be time to carry out the plan. It was already the finals and would end in just a few days. Han Xiao was perfecting his plan to bring the players away. On this day, Raylan skipped Bennett and contacted Han Xiao directly, giving him the final warning with a very aggressive and tough tone. "Black Phantom, we know you captured Goder as investigator. You have made a big mistake. We respect the contributions that you made during the war with the Germinal organization, but we won't allow you to use that contribution to do whatever you want. Give the Goderin to us, this is the last warning, or we will take the necessary measures. You won't want that to happen. Although you're very strong, you will not be able to match up to our nation. K. Bye. Ka-chin." Han Xiao ended the communication and rubbed the bridge of his nose, speechless. Raylan refused to give up and wanted to pressure him, but Han Xiao did not want to waste his time with them now. Han Xiao was sitting in his office at this time, and Kurlad was right beside him. This Goderin was standing next to the window and looking out at the players on the square. He suddenly said, "So, is this the special phenomenon on your planet?" Kurlad still remembered his investigation mission. During this time, he had noticed the so-called inhuman phenomenon as well and seen many of the characteristics of the players. "This is your investigation mission, right? So, have you reached a conclusion?" Han Xiao asked. Chapter 312, Inhuman and the Space Wonder. "There's nothing much to conclude. I only have some guesses from my observation," Kurlad said. "When I received the mission, the government on this planet described the phenomenon from the point of view of undeveloped civilization. You call this occurrence inhuman phenomenon. They said that these inhuman aren't anything special, but more and more of them kept appearing. They could not tell where they came from, and they just integrated into this planet's environment. Their behavior was weird, and they had a special connection with each other. Most importantly, they cannot die, and they learn and grow at a rapid rate." What he babbled on about was the view of the 6 nations on the players, in addition to some of his own observations. Han Xiao was curious on how the advanced civilization understood this phenomenon. The most special characteristic is that they can revive after they die while keeping the same personality. Kurlad finally showed his aura of an investigator. There are a lot of reasons for the cause of this phenomenon, and the simplest explanation is that this is an evolution of an esper power of a group of people, which is highly improbable but still possible. It could also be due to some complex causes such as the life projection technology, which may be an experiment of an advanced civilization, or it is possible that these people were created from a disruption between clashes of different planes. Another reason may be that the Inhumans are accidental projections from a civilization far away in a different space and time, and they are a new life form created by some unexplained rules in the universe. I know a dozen theories that can explain this phenomenon. Space wonder is the hardest way to understand what is happening, and I personally think that it is the least possible hypothesis out of all theories. These Inhumans had another important characteristic: there was a sudden increase in the number of Inhumans. This means that this is not a natural phenomenon. But to be sure of this possibility, I need special tools to find out the cause, to see if any civilizations are responsible for this. However, I need to ask management for approval to use a rare detection tool. If the civilization is too advanced, there won't be a way for us to find out. To be honest, I don't think that any civilization will find this planet useful to invest their life projection technology in. If we hypothesize that it is a natural phenomenon rather than human intervention, then it is possible that the planes crossed each other and that the planet was right on top of the crack that resulted from the clash of planes. But if there is a crack, why aren't there any instances where people disappeared on the planet? Han Xiao froze, and he remembered that Hans and the others disappeared into thin air. Was there actually a crack in plane? No, the players definitely did not have any relationship with the crack, but there was a possibility that the planes had overlapped. If the player's world was a plane, and that plane crossed with that of the game, then it was not impossible. What's the difference between different planes? Han Xiao asked. Does that mean it is another universe? Kurlad laughed. There are a lot of definitions for planes, but there are three basic categories. First is the outer plane, which is often seen in highly developed magic civilizations, where powerful wizards can summon creatures from another plane. They are usually formed from imagination and mental energy. The more realistic way to explain this is that wizards can use their imagination to create an actual tangible object. This is the evidence that the outer plane indeed exists, but the plane itself is not tangible. It seems rather contradictory, but theory for this phenomenon is that we are limited by our sense, so there are life forms and super knowledge that we don't. I'm not a wizard, so I don't have an in-depth understanding. The second category is the material plane, such as dimensional plane, microscopic plane, and other planes that exist in the real world. These are more commonly seen, and it is the most widely accepted scientific theory on planes. The last category believes that the theory of planes is just a misunderstanding because two planets, each on opposite sides of the universe, suddenly had some connection that led to a wormhole that connected the two worlds. Because they had never made contact before, they thought that the other was from a different plane. However, the universe you are talking about is from the theory where there are multiple universes, and it is believed that there is an uncountable number of universes. Seems like you are an advocate for this theory, but we do not have much research in Godara, so I also don't understand it well. Han Xiao was enlightened by the perspective that the NPCs had when they saw new players coming into this world. Kurlad then continued. As for high dimension projection, it will touch on the theory of the space-time dimension. For example, as objects in the three-dimension world, we see that a two-dimensional space is just a plane like paper. This paper represents a complete environment. Imagine that if a two-dimensional man stood in front of a mountain, the world is still three-dimensional, and the two-dimensional man will have to climb the mountain to get to the other side. But for a three-dimensional object, we can put our finger on the paper and move to any place on the plane and overcome the mountain that a two-dimensional man faces. As for a two-dimensional perspective to interpret three-dimensional world, the observed phenomenon would be the area that the finger and paper are in contact. The contact surface can be changed, so the projected impression will be unstable. The perception between a higher and lower dimension is different. For example, if we ignore the debate on whether time is an independent or dependent variable, and we assume that time is the fourth dimension that actually exists, then in the eyes of a life form in the higher dimension, we might be just creatures created by a combination of thousands of time points, as if it was a worm. The Inhumans may be beings from the higher dimension that touched our dimension. For the knowledge of dimensions, you should ask a civilization with more expertise on this. Godara is pretty weak in this area of research. Han Xiao pursed his lips. The world of the players did not have better technology compared to this world, so it probably not high dimension projection. That's everything for theory on explaining the new creatures. The theory that I don't get is the space wonder that no civilization can understand. So, it is completely unknown. Han Xiao was shocked. Even the civilization on top of the universe also can't understand it? Haha, there are still unexplored places in the universe, so of course, there are still things we don't understand. Maybe those advanced civilizations are hiding their knowledge, but I will share my understanding. Kurlad showed his passion and excitement in his tone. I have some understanding of universe theoretical studies. There were millions of explanations for the workings of the universe, and because of the nature of curiosity in intelligent beings, we all eventually ask questions like who am I, where do I come from, and where am I going? That is why people are enthusiastic about the origin of life, the truth of the world, and the meaning of existence. Civilizations use these curiosities as fuel to explore the origin, truth, form, process, and the end of the universe. Ultimately, different civilizations will have different interpretations. To understand the nature of the universe, exploration of the physical world is needed. Now we know that particles are the building blocks of the world, and there are also different theories on the formation of the particles. Different universe theories have different explanations for particles, such as its use and shape. If one zooms in on a particle, is it just a single point? Or will it be like the shape of a planet? Will there be different shapes for different particles? Or are the shapes just randomized? The most common view is that if we truly understand the characteristics of particles, then all the incorrect theories will be rejected, and only one correct theory will remain. If there are theories that can be proven with hard facts from experiments, not only should it work on one theory, but it can prove all the existing theories in the world. There will also be theories that contradict with each other. Isn't that amazing? So, civilization's understanding of this world is still shallow. There is still a towering wall between us and the truth. All theories are like holes in the wall, and we look through the wall to see the other side. We can only see small parts of the other side, and we can't get through the wall. Theories only allow us to view the world from a certain perspective, and different perspectives will lead to different results. All the results of the theories are just the tip of the iceberg. This is similar to the limitation of our perception that I mentioned before. The phenomenon that a life form observes all depends on the perception abilities. In the places that we can't see, touch, smell, taste, and hear hides a lot of unknown knowledge. Our sensory organs let us understand the world, but they also hinder us from truly knowing everything in the world. Do you still remember the dimensional projection? Maybe this universe is just a projection from a higher dimension. There even is a theory that believes that the world is just a simulation. All the natural laws are created by some physical engine, and we are the test subjects of some life form much bigger than us that's controlling us using some complex calculations. Han Xiao's heart skipped a beat. Chapter 313, The Selection. Han Xiao raised an eyebrow and asked, has this been proven? Well, not really. As he played with his ponytail, Kurlot explained, this kind of belief in a greater being and the creation myth behind the origins of the universe is most focused on by the Arcane Church, one of the three major civilizations in space. Their beliefs in the spiritual and the supernatural is the source of their power. Stop. I know what the Arcane Church is. Han Xiao stopped interrupted him mid-sentence. Sure. Right, where were we? Oh. These theories and beliefs of the universe's mysteries are all different, but through them, different civilizations were able to come up with countless technological inventions and applications. So, from another angle, these theories are only a tool to be used to understand the universe. Like tools, they all have their own pros and cons. Each tool is responsible for a specific task, and in the case of these theories, none can be considered the be-all and all. Argotaran's particle theory argues that all the particles in the world carry magic, and as such, our civilization started being dominated by the use of magic. Later on, as we discovered the usefulness of technology, we also started to do research to facilitate technological development. Both of these are only tools that we use to help understand the world. Han Xiao frowned. You know quite a lot. Haha. I'm a trained investigator. I have heard all sorts of things during my rounds in the different space stations that I visited throughout the universe. Kurlod smiled. Basically, all the unsolved mysteries in space are commonly referred to as the wonders of space, or space wonders. Inhumans are unlikely to be one such universe-wide mystery. Space wonders, huh? Han Xiao made sure to remember this. Suddenly, the sound of cheering crashed over the chatting duo like a tsunami. Han Xiao went onto the forums to check out the commotion as there was currently a live broadcast of the tournament. All the fights had come to an end, and a champion had been born. For the team matches, Dynasty had clinched the top spot after a hard-fought battle against Long Sky, while Temple of God had closely followed behind as the third team. Although the three big guilds had lived up to their names and taken all three top spots, the other teams who managed to reach the top 8 had all shown breathtaking performances. For individual matches, King Admiral had secured a victory in the finals and netted Dynasty 2 championships, causing their fame to skyrocket. Frenzied Sword had defeated his opponent and secured his spot as third in the individual rankings. Due to his relatively new gaming career, he was dubbed the dark horse of the tournament. The top 3 teams as well as the top 3 players from the individual matches on Planet Aquamarine had all qualified for the internationals. All 3 teams were from Chinese guilds, and countless players looked forward to seeing them compete on the global stage. The forums were bustling with discussion as if a national celebration was going on, and Dynasty was naturally the talk of the town. After the end of the regionals, there was still an in-game year before the international games would start, and the matches could be considered to have already ended. However, the players' excitement did not look like it was going to die down anytime soon. Countless posts analyzed the winners from each region, and some teams started to make plans to prepare for future competitions. The guilds whose teams performed well also held numerous events to boost their own popularity. They're finally done with the matches. Those pro players are finally free. Han Xiao's eyes gave off a weird glint as he prepared his next stage of action. At the Sanctuary's square, the roads were bustling with players who were living in the excitement of the tournament. They each discussed their own favorites, and the pro players would occasionally show up themselves, exciting the crowd even more. Of course, there were also the group of brothers who believed in their luck, waiting day in and day out at Han Xiao's usual stall for the next batch of loot crates. He's coming. The group of people stretched out their necks as they waited. The truck drove by slowly before it came to a stop. Han Xiao walked off the truck, but it did not seem like he was going to sell loot crates as usual. Instead, he took a look around and said in a loud voice, "I have a perilous mission ahead, and I'm in need of helpers. I will be selecting qualified people to join my team. If you're confident in passing my test, come." Immediately after, Han Xiao sent out the mission that he had previously written up. Team member selection. Mission introduction: Han Xiao will soon leave Planet Aquamarine in secret to begin a new adventure. He is looking for powerful people to fight alongside him. Those who pass his test can venture off into the stars with him. Mission requirement: LV 60. Mission period: 5 days. Completion requirement: pass Han Xiao's combat test. Reward: 1 EXP and the qualification to go with Han Xiao on his journey. This instantly caused massive waves among the players. Everyone had widened eyes as they read through the mission information. This is so sudden. Can we now leave the beginner planet? I can't believe we need to have max level before we can take the test. This is so frustrating. Up till now, the players had all been limited to their respective beginner planets, and none were able to travel into space. News of Han Xiao's mission exploded within the present players, and they rushed to release this information onto the forums. The whole of Planet Aquamarine was shocked, and even players on the other planets were talking about this. The forums were thrown into chaos once more. Every single player's attention was forcefully wrenched over from the previous competitions to Han Xiao's shocking new mission. Space and galaxy was still a complete unknown to the current players, and many were curious and anticipating it. However, everyone was stuck on their beginner planet. Now that news had gotten out about a chance to venture off into the stars, something that should only have been possible in later versions, the players could not help but get more excited than ever. This was a chance. If they could follow Han Xiao, they would be able to travel into space much earlier than their peers, giving them massive advantages over the others. Han Xiao had nonchalantly thrown out a mission with such huge implications that it was like a bomb had gone off. The players realized that Han Xiao had not actually mentioned going into space, rather, this information was revealed by the mission notice. The players were secretly happy as they thought that they had hit the jackpot and were able to glance into Han Xiao's true intentions. Naturally, Han Xiao had done that on purpose as he was aware how the players would react. He knew that the players would feel a sense of accomplishment when they saw this. Standing there, he just smiled as he watched everything unfold on the forums. He was only planning on bringing the pro players, so he obviously needed a plausible excuse and could not be too obvious about it. The maximum level requirement would be able to filter out most of the casual players, while the combat testing could easily be manipulated by him. As long as they could last 30 seconds against him in a fight, they would have passed the test. With this, he should be able to acquire all the professional talents. The news very quickly caught the pros' attention. These players were done with their matches and had nothing on their hand. There was still another year before they would fight on the global stage, however, as they were all already maxed out in levels, there was not much that they could do aside from personal training and trying to learn some new skills. Most of the winning teams who had qualified for the next stage were in the same position. But now, Han Xiao had given them a chance to adventure in a brand new map. New maps meant countless new possibilities. These pro players could not have been happier. In their eyes, this was the same as a blessing from God, and this chance could not be missed. On the second day, countless pro players gathered in the sanctuary's square. It was like a celebrity red carpet event. These star players dazzled the crowd as they walked on the road. Oh right. A while ago, wasn't there a similar scene a while ago when Black Phantom started selling advanced knowledge? There are still recordings of that time, but things are on a much bigger scale this time. Basically, all the pro players on planet Aquamarine have come here today. Both events have something to do with Black Phantom. The matches had just drawn to a close, and most players were still in the sanctuary. This was one of the reasons that Han Xiao had chose this time to announce the mission. Soon, a bunch of people had accepted the mission. Han Xiao walked back a bit to make some space and randomly chose a pro player who he did not recognize and said, "Hold for 30 seconds, and you pass." About 1,000 people had accepted the mission, and they all discussed among themselves as they watched. 30 seconds can't be that difficult, right? Said the second prince. Even if I went one-on-one against a level 60 boss in the wild, I could at least survive for a few minutes. Li Ji looked at the time and shook his head. 30 seconds for everyone is quite long. As the players chatted, the players and the pros all used detect on Han Xiao to get some basic information. Han Xiao. Level. Type. Danger scale, extremely dangerous. It's all question marks. Everyone's faces suddenly changed. They had all reached version 1.0's level cap, and when they used the same ability on the other boss level NPCs, they could at least see some of the target's basic info such as character level and character type. However, they could not see anything when using it on Han Xiao. There was even a question mark on his basic identity. He had to be at least 5 levels higher than them, right? Ever since maxing out their levels, they had never encountered something like this. Just how high was Black Phantom's level? Chapter 314, As expected of the great mechanic Han. This new information caused a commotion within the players. I've never seen any main NPCs that are over LV 60. But he's still extremely dangerous like the last time I inspected him. Was he already this strong back then? It didn't feel like that. Based on his story, Black Phantom didn't start out strong. He suddenly became strong later on, eventually becoming the one to topple the Germinal organization. I guess this is what sets him apart as the main character in the storyline. Black Phantom's combat strength is definitely on the level of bosses. I wonder how he ranks on the entire planet. The player's first impression of Han Xiao was that he was very strong. However, his actual strength was still a myth. Most of them had watched the recordings of Han Xiao's fights out of curiosity ever since they started playing the game. Now that they realized that they still could not inspect his character information even after maxing out their levels, they could not wait to see Han Xiao go up against these pro players and demonstrate his strength. 30 seconds doesn't sound too difficult, right? Most of the players, including the mission participants, thought this. Although they could not inspect his stats, they made the assumption based on his previous battle recordings as well as the fact that he was only a version 1.0 character. Although he was definitely strong, how much stronger than them could he be? The difference between them and Han Xiao's strength had to have decreased significantly since the start of the game. They were players. They leveled up super fast. The first player who was selected for the test had the ID Falling Leaf, and he took a big step out of the crowd. The surrounding players immediately backed up to clear a space. Although fighting in players' main city would usually worsen their reputations with the city's NPCs, it should be fine with Han Xiao there. Countless pairs of eyes stared unblinkingly, as if waiting for something. Start. Han Xiao said a single word. Falling Leaf immediately got into a defensive stance while waiting for the incoming blow. Hum. 4 sonic spheres flew out while crisscrossing in the air. Attached to the spheres were detection devices that both increased the weapon's range and accuracy. An ear-piercing explosion suddenly bloomed on the stage. Falling Leaf's health dropped instantly, and he was rooted where he was by a stunned effect. Boom boom boom. 6 pre-planted turrets suddenly sprang out of the ground and simultaneously opened fire on Falling Leaf. The combined firing rate was so fast that it was as if a miniature hailstorm was occurring where Falling Leaf was standing. Within a few moments, Falling Leaf collapsed onto the ground after being blasted to bits by the turret. Although Falling Leaf had activated multiple energy skills to surround himself with a thin layer of energy, he was pinned to the ground as bullets rained down on him. The sonic spheres were also constantly applying various kinds of crowd control debuffs on him, locking him on the ground. His health dropped to a dangerously low level within the blink of an eye, but the hurricane-like assault suddenly stopped, and the ground cleared up as if nothing had happened. "You didn't pass," said Han Xiao with a flat voice. Falling Leaf was stunned. It was all over before he even realized what had happened. The surrounding players all had their mouths hanging wide open as they could not believe what had just happened. A max-level pro player could not even resist for 5 seconds before almost being wiped out. There was no need to even talk about skills or controls. Han Xiao might as well have just hung him up and whipped his backside. The player had been completely suppressed. What surprised the players even more was that Han Xiao had remained in the same position throughout the whole thing. Even his pose was the same. Are mechanics supposed to be this overpowered? Do we really have the same class? He didn't even move. How did he control those weapons? Isn't he too overpowered for version 1.0? Could it be that planet Aquamarine can no longer limit him and that's why he has decided to go into space? Based on his past battle recordings, Black Phantom still has a lot of cards up his sleeves. This means that he didn't even go all out. Wasn't that DPS a bit too ridiculous? Even a 50-man raiding party would be turned into mincemeat if they had to fight a boss like that. The same question once again surfaced in the players' minds, albeit with them feeling completely different emotions this time around. Just how high was Black Phantom's level? The players had been in contact with Han Xiao ever since the open beta. They had thought that they had already closed the level gap between each other after farming so much experience. But never would they have expected to be so wrong, as expected of the great mechanic Han. When Han Xiao turned around and saw the dumb expressions on the players' faces, he knew that he had achieved the intended effects. He had once again refreshed his position in the players' hearts, and they once again worshipped him. Although the players were at max level, they were still too lacking in terms of talents, attributes, and skills. Their characters were still, after all, built around player templates. Han Xiao had now reached LV70, and he was only stuck here due to the class change requirements, unable to choose a new subclass. However, the difference between him and the players was the difference between one whole version. On top of that, with Han Xiao's boss templates, his countless talents, skills, energy capacity, and weapons, the damage that he was able to output was unimaginable for the players. LV60 players only had around 3,000 health and some meager defense. They were still too weak in front of him. Moreover, his sonic spheres had been upgraded to the purple grade and had very high damage. Sonic spheres were a very unique type of weapon in version 1.0. They operated on an entirely different set of tactics, dealt very high damage, and required high-level control skills. The pro players' expressions were all frozen on their faces. Li Ji realized how wrong he had been when he ran his mouth off earlier, saying that this would take a long time. Han Xiao had basically one-shot the previous challenger. None of the participating players dared to be careless anymore, and they all listened carefully for when they got picked. Everyone was starting to feel nervous in front of this monstrous foe. The battles continued. The following players were much more careful, and they all tried their best to kite around Han Xiao. None dared go head-on. The moment a player was hit by Han Xiao's attacks, they would go down within 10 seconds. Everyone tried everything that they could to survive for 30 seconds. The surrounding audience grew in size, and some started to post recordings of the fights onto the forums. The people who watched the recordings were flabbergasted. It had only been a few days ago that these pro players had been showing off their skills in the tournament. However, watching them getting butchered like pigs by this NPC aroused their curiosity. It was not an everyday occurrence for them to be able to watch pro players get bullied like that. More and more people got interested in this event as they got to watch the pros get shredded one after another. Han Xiao's strength was also recognized once again. Many posts were discussing this topic intensely. The happy bunch, of course, consisted of the mechanics. Mechanics, on average, had the worst performance during the tournaments, causing many of them to be unhappy about the status quo. Watching Han Xiao pop off was like a breath of fresh air. So, we can become that strong. Please show us the way. Han Xiao's mission had exploded among all players, and many tried to come up with jokes about the situation. What was originally a serious topic quickly turned into a source of memes. Only someone as famous as Han Xiao could get this kind of treatment. Black Phantom, hold on for 30 seconds if you are a man. Shocking. Pro players can't even do it for 30 seconds. Guide by pro players, how to hold on for 30 seconds. Making fun out of everything was what these players were best at. 30 seconds soon became a well-known term, while seconds became something that people used to quantify a pro player's strength. Those are players who were able to make it to the end of the 30-second test all became the legendary 30 seconds warriors. The selection continued into the night. The crowd only started to disperse after Han Xiao had returned to his quarters to rest. The mission period was 5 days, and the remaining pro players went away with heavy feelings in their hearts, stressing about coming up with a strategy for the next day. Han Xiao was just about to enter his house when he thought about something and suddenly stopped. He then turned and walked toward the room with Frenzied Sword and the others. When Han Xiao pushed open the door to their room, he saw that the four were chilling in the room. They immediately stood up when they saw Han Xiao walk in, curious as to what was about to happen. Black Phantom would not look for them on normal occasions. He would only find them when he had missions or benefits to distribute. When the four thought about the commotion earlier in the morning, they were able to make some faint guesses, and the anticipation started to show on their faces. As Black Phantom's followers, they had always been receiving special treatment. So, maybe this time as well. Han Xiao chuckled before saying, "You're all my friends. I am about to leave this planet for the boundless world above. Are you guys willing to come with me? Look at this." Everyone had only been able to find out about Han Xiao's plans through the mission that he gave out earlier. Yet, he had come to invite them in person. They could even directly skip the selection. What a caring boss. I'm willing. Frenzied Sword answered without a second's hesitation with a face full of excitement. Chapter 315, Prelude to an Age of Strife, 1. Although Frenzied Sword and Hao Tian had both accepted the selection mission, neither was confident about passing. Now, with Han Xiao's direct offer, the two could finally let out a deep breath. This was a golden opportunity, and of course, none of them would want to reject it. Bun Hit Dog was especially happy about it. He understood the impact that being one of the first few players to journey into space could have on his videos. Moreover, most of the people to follow Han Xiao would certainly be exceptional pro players, allowing him to interview them whenever he wanted to boost his show's popularity. At first, he had felt heartbroken when he saw the requirements that one needed to meet in order to join Han Xiao's journey. He was not a particularly skillful player, and he had thought that he had no chance of following along Han Xiao. In this moment, Bun Hit Dog was so excited that he would have jumped through the ceiling, but he stopped himself after he thought about the fines that he would have to pay if he did. To Han Xiao, Bun Hit Dog was the perfect reporter. Although he did not even think that Bun Hit Dog would be good enough to be cannon fodder, his role in the group was still irreplaceable. Bun Hit Dog's show served as a bridge between Han Xiao and the players, and it helped to boost his popularity. Han Xiao leading the only group of players who could adventure in space would definitely bring in loads of attention. So, he would be able to continue to leave a deep impression on the players despite having left planet Aquamarine. The players' curiosity for the space in Galaxy as well as their fan craze on the pro players would ensure views for Bun Hit Dog's exploration diary. After all, things like this were highly entertaining for the players and would be in high demand. "Are you really going to space?" asked Maple Moon curiously. She was a big fan of anything plot and lore related. Han Xiao's eyes flashed. He glanced at Bun Hit Dog before saying in a cryptic way, "This planet is about to witness an unprecedented calamity. Only the endless reaches in the galaxy beyond hold the key to saving the planet." Calamity. The four were shocked. Bun Hit Dog had started recording their conversation the moment Maple Moon asked that question. He had a feeling that what Han Xiao had said just then could be something big very soon. A few days later. Boom. Within the flashes and sounds of explosions stood the second prince, who was still hanging on for all he was worth. 14, 13. The surrounding crowd counted down in excitement. "Kman, you can do it, man. You must join the 30 Seconds Club." Sun Eggplant was fanning the flames from the side. He stood with a small group of people who had all passed the test. Han Xiao had secretly weakened his attacks for certain players as they were the one that he wanted on his team. Most of them were big names in the pro scene and those that had performed well in the tournament. The onlooking players could only feel envious about it, and they comforted themselves by telling themselves that those who had passed were all godly pro players. The group of people who had passed were then called the 30 Seconds Club. Damn, you just needed another second. Why do I keep finishing early? During the days of the selection, Han Xiao never changed his attacking style. He just stood still and controlled the sonic spheres and the turrets to suppress the challenger. This gave the players hope, as they believed that this was just like clearing a dungeon. They could always learn and analyze Han Xiao's moves from the others' attempts and even their own failures, thus gaining an advantage for themselves later on. However, try as they might, no matter how much the players learned about the fight, most were completely suppressed by Han Xiao and could not even last longer than 10 seconds. Second Prince, huh. He's not bad, thought Han Xiao as he slowly let up his attacks. An opening. Second Prince's eyes flashed, and he threw himself on the ground and rolled out of the range of the attacks. The rain of bullets slowly inched toward him, and he did not even have time to get back up on his feet before he started to wiggle around on the ground in a desperate attempt to stay alive. 2, 1, 0. He made it? I can't believe he used his trump card repeated barrel rolls. The crowd started laughing at the pro player's sorry state. Second Prince got back up with a face covered in smoke and dirt, and Sun Eggplant, who stood to the side, raised his thumb before snickering. You have really opened my eyes today. You even pioneered your own fighting style, becoming the Grand Master of barrel rolls. What a man. King Admiral pretended to be comprehending something. It feels like it would be quite useful. How about you learn it as well, Li Ji? Li Ji remained expressionless. What an embarrassment. Screw off. Second Prince was enraged. This bunch of star players were opponents in competitions, but they were also old friends, and they often bickered among each other whenever they hung out. Han Xiao had basically gotten all the members that he needed. He had already gotten a hold of pro players from the 4 big guilds and from the top 8 teams. Most of the top 8s from the individual matches had also joined his team. After counting up everyone, there was a little over 50 people total, but it was not a big deal, as he could simply purchase the new tickets on board. Thanks to the official tournament, Han Xiao had an easy time looking for talents. He had packed most of the top rankers on planet Aquamarine into his group in one go. To him, not only were the players the best cannon fodder, they were also his main information channel. Galaxy offered countless storylines, and Han Xiao could become the middleman to offer all these missions to the players, just like he did on the planet. That way, a part of all the pro players' earnings would go directly into his pocket. He had basically acquired a group of sweet, little bees that would work tirelessly for him, earning the resources that would have gone to the other NPCs instead. This was the correct way to utilize the players' advantages. Ultimately, Galaxy was like a theme park, full of distractions. He would need to use some methods if he wanted to ensure that these players stayed by his side. Now, having established his position among the players as one of their own combined with the benefits that moving together as a single party would offer, there should not be any problems in the short run. Han Xiao would not have to worry about the pro players being tempted by something else in space for now. Regardless, Han Xiao had long since become accustomed to being prepared for anything. He had already come up with a more concrete plan to deal with issues. However, he would have to wait until they actually entered space before he could start implementing his plan. This was not some sort of idea that had sprung out from a moment's brilliance, but rather, a plan that he had thought up after considering the big picture, and it was a crucial step for his future developments. They're all star players. Isn't this too extravagant of a lineup? Doesn't it feel like we're a few people short? The more meticulous fans realized that Hao Tian and Frenzied Sword had not come for the mission. All the other pro players came. How could they let go of a chance like this? Even other Long Sky members participated in the selection. The star players had also realized this, and Li Ji frowned. Where are those two? Where's Hao Tian? Sleepy Winter felt helpless. I have already asked. Old Hao and Frenzied Sword were already qualified to begin with. The crowd could not process what Sleepy Winter had just said for a second. Hao Tian and Frenzied Sword had triggered Black Phantom's hidden storyline. Was that why they got this special treatment? The bunch of pro players suddenly felt a sense of unfairness in their hearts. They could not believe that they had to come here to get tortured over and over again, while those two just backdoored their way in. Where was the justice in that? The pro players were jealous to no end. They also wanted to receive such benefits. Once the testing was over, the crowd started, albeit quite unwillingly. However, at that moment, Han Xiao silently sent out another pre-written mission to the surrounding players. The Last Bastion. Mission type, prize pool mission. The players stopped dead in their tracks and focused on the new information. What a sudden mission. Where did it come from? Black Phantom didn't say anything, right? Could he be the one who sent it? Prize pool. What's this? 1,000 experience points are required to accept this mission. Let's try it out. Many could not hold back their curiosity, and immediately accepted the mission. However, they were all surprised when they all found out that this mission was grayed out. Mission introduction: someday in the future, a calamity will strike this world, and Sanctuary 3 will become the last remaining bastion for humanity. Protect this dwindling flame from the encroaching darkness. Only then will there be hope to overcome this calamity. Requirement: protect Sanctuary 3. The destruction rate must not go above 50%. Mission status: frozen. Start date: unknown. The grayed out name implied that this mission had not started. This was the first time that the players had seen a mission with the frozen status, and many were mystified. Word soon got out, and more people learned of this news. Chapter 316, Prelude to an Age of Strife, 2. Han Xiao could assign all sorts of missions, and those that were in the challenging category were more difficult than usual. They were often large-scale missions, where every movement of the individual players could impact the final result. Therefore, they had to work together to complete the mission. He had witnessed some missions that could affect the version, where millions of players fought for the same goal. Every player's actions earned contribution points, and the mission needed tens of millions of points to complete. Once finished, it would be the turning point of the entire storyline. The Last Bastion was a mission that Han Xiao had created so that the players would still protect Sanctuary 3 after he left the planet. In the mission introduction, he hinted that there would be a disaster that would fall upon the land, yet he was vague in the description. However, it was enough to raise the interest of the players as they tried to guess the future storyline. Han Xiao did not give out a clear instruction just so that the players would think that the information was a leak from the mission, which would make it credible. The testing mission that he had published before was just to warm up the players. Freezing a mission was a special method where the mission would not start until the disaster actually arrived. Han Xiao then could activate the mission from miles away. This was like bait for the players as it lured their curiosity about the fate of their future. One condition to issue a mission was that Han Xiao could not be too far away from the players. Han Xiao had tested a lot of trials to find out this hidden condition. After he left the planet, it was impossible for him to directly give missions to the players. But now he could activate the mission from far away by using frozen missions. There's still a few days before I leave the sanctuary. I have enough time to walk around the entire city and give missions to hundreds of thousands of players, Han Xiao thought to himself. With this, he could ensure that the players would still hang around Sanctuary 3 as if it was their main hub. At the beginning of version 2.0, these players could protect the sanctuary through the hardest times. For the players, shocking news came wave after wave. Since Han Xiao had remained in the dark for quite some time after the storyline of the Germinal organization, the players had started to believe the analysis of Galaxy Times, thinking that the character had no more storyline and was just a normal NPC. But after staying quiet for more than half a year, Black Phantom had started to become active again, and his actions were shocking. He wanted to take the players across the galaxy. Not only that, Black Phantom also left a frozen prize pool mission, and the introduction hinted at a disaster that would sweep across planet Aquamarine. The old-fashioned NPCs return from the dead started another wave of nostalgia players as they remembered the time when Black Phantom took over the world after the game launched. The scene was now showing in front of their eyes, and it felt rather dear to them. On the forums, countless of players were discussing what was the upcoming disaster. Alien invasion? Another war from the Six Nations that destroys the whole planet? Or is it a natural disaster? I think this could be the start of a new storyline. Just look at storyline on the other planets, all of them are intense, while planet Aquamarine is so chill. It's time for something to happen. Someone once said those long divided shall be united, and those long united shall be divided. Is this the start of the romance of the Six Nations? With the boiling discussion in the forums, one player out of nowhere connected the two things that Han Xiao had done. Is it possible that Black Phantom is trying to escape the disaster and that's why he wants to leave the planet as soon as possible? No way. I still remember an episode in Cabbage Hits itself. It was a speech from Black Phantom to gather troops, and he said that he would do everything he could to protect the innocent lives. Isn't that courageous? If that's the reason, then there must be no hope for us to survive, and that's why Black Phantom is leaving his hometown. I wonder how devastating the disaster will be. There won't be that much of a change in storyline, right? Maybe not. It's possible that Black Phantom is just scared. Don't you see that he is trying to gather helpers for his escape? Quit joking around. He's still a main character in the storyline. He wrecked the Germinal organization by himself. Do you think he'll still run away? Well, the circumstances are different. A lot of his story with the Germinal organization had to do with planning. Moreover, there is a history between him and the Germinal organization. They were each other's mortal enemies, so of course they would use everything that they had to kill the other. But that's a different story for disasters. If he has the chance to run away, why wouldn't he do so? And here I am, still thinking that he wouldn't have any more screen time after the Germinal organization incident. One single topic would not have only one explanation. Some people stood up for Han Xiao, while others stood against him. Han Xiao was not bothered at all because having oppositions was not a bad thing. It was through conflict that more people would pay attention. On the other hand, if everyone praised how almighty Han Xiao was, then it would easily bore the players. However, Bun Hit Dog did not want the players to look down on Han Xiao for thinking that he was trying to run away. Bun Hit Dog had already decided to start a new space adventure show, and if the audience viewed him as a deserter, then it would negatively affect to the show. On the other hand, if Han Xiao's reason for going to the outer space was courageous and noble, then their upcoming adventures would touch the hearts of the audience, which fit with the content that Bun Hit Dog had planned. Because of that, Bun Hit Dog leaked the discussion between Han Xiao and the other three, which could reveal the reason for Han Xiao's departure to find a solution for the upcoming disaster. This suddenly boosted the public's view of Han Xiao. At the end of the episode, Bun Hit Dog released the preview. As I looked up the mysterious night sky, my heart and soul were absorbed in the solidarity. I will follow Black Phantom to the world beyond the stars, and for this, I will create a new series recording the moments of the journey in the universe and present them right in front of you. Coming soon. Because the topic was hot, Bun Hit Dog's preview for the show spread like a wildfire. The players then all understood that Han Xiao's departure from the planet was to save them from a disaster. Without any delay, most of the players all respected him from the bottom of their hearts, while a small minority were still suspicious. No matter what attitude the players had, they were all paying close attention to the event, thinking about Han Xiao traveling through the galaxy, and they were excited for Bun Hit Dog new show. These new messages, however, were only visible for the players. The organizations on the planet still had no idea what was happening. In the powering snow and freezing wind stood a mountain range located in the territory of Raylan. There were a lot of wild beasts in the mountains without any civilization. Not even a single town was visible within dozens of miles, and the roar of beasts echoed in the mountain range. Raylan's secret laboratory was right there in the mountains. Inside the laboratory, Kurlad's spaceship was hanging in midair, and thousands of pieces of equipment and wires surrounded the spaceship, detecting any data coming out from the spaceship and presenting it on the big screen. Countless researchers came and went while adjusting the equipment. After moving the spaceship around for more than 10 days, Raylan secretly organized people for this research operation, the best researchers from both the military and the intelligence organization. There were normal people and some mechanic superhumans. Even with so many talents working together, there was little progress to be seen. The technology that built the spaceship was too advanced for the people on planet Aquamarine to understand. Moreover, Godaran technology also contained magic, requiring the magic engravings for it to work. It was a completely different type of technology compared to that of planet Aquamarine. For the researchers who had never seen magic, they did not know where to start. In their eyes, this spaceship lacked many important components and modules, and they could not even find where the energy source was. They only found some parts that looked related to the energy source, some really ancient parts, and a black liquid object that looked like motor oil. It was stored in an empty test tube on the side and being experimented on. Chapter 317, Lift Off. Translator, Atlas Studios. Editor, Atlas Studios. The director of the research operation walked in with high officials wearing Raylan's military uniform. An older gentleman who looked like the leader said with a deep frown, "Any progress?" "There's literally no progress at all," the director responded helplessly. "The alien spaceship technology is too much for us to comprehend. We can't solve the mystery. The meters from measuring equipment are constantly jumping at the same time, which was completely illogical. Then copy just a small part. I only need something concrete. Sorry, but most of the components are too weird in structure, and we don't even know what they are used for. We tried to copy the engravings on the spaceship, but nothing happened, and we can't even start the engine up. After years of investment, you give me this kind of answer." The old official stared at the director coldly. The director was sweating. "But there is something that we have found out. Please follow me." The group then moved in front of the transparent test tube that contained the black liquid. The director said, "This seems to be motor oil that the spaceship uses for fuel. It is extremely dense and viscous. We found some special characteristic that resembles a microorganism after looking through the microscope. More importantly, its reaction can produce energy. From our understanding, the molecules in the liquid can separate by itself and reproduce while keeping the original mass. The extra molecules are then released as energy. The process is completely automatic, meaning that it can produce energy without any input. This is revolutionary. We think that this is a reusable energy source that is used by alien civilizations. If this object can keep on separating molecules and producing energy, in theory, it can produce an unlimited amount of energy. We are still trying to understand the mechanism behind the process." The black liquid slowly moved in the test tube, and the old official frowned. "Why is it moving by itself? Is it a living creature? This should be the reason it could produce molecules. It has characteristics of microorganisms, but it does not have a nervous system, which means that it does not have conscience, so the movement is probably a reaction from the molecule separation process. This liquid is basically the same as bacteria." Since it was an alien technology, all the researchers accepted all the unexplained phenomenon, and the director added, "We have already run the tests. The liquid is not radioactive, and it does not contain poisonous materials. We also used a death row prisoner to touch the liquid with his body, and nothing went wrong after the contact." The old official nodded, and the others all looked at the liquid. "The progress is still too slow," one of the officials said. "Our time is limited, and we can't keep on hiding this operation from the Godaran civilization. We need physical copies as soon as possible. But the difference in technology is too much, it's not easy to break through this barrier. Unless," the director hesitated. "Unless there's someone who understands the technology to help us." The higher officials quickly looked at each other and thought of the same person. The missing Godaran. He must understand this technology. If we can find him, not only can we report this back to Godara, we can also use the excuse of repairing his spaceship to obtain part of their technology. The old official turned to the official of intelligence organization and asked, "How is it with the dark net? When will Han Xiao turn the man in?" He never responded, the intelligence official replied coldly, and the dark net keeps on postponing the request. "God damn it," the old official shouted with anger. "He is crossing the line on this matter that can impact the future of this planet. A civilian organization dares to ignore us, do they want to die? Should we send someone? The southern continent is Stardragon and Hessless territory, so he thinks that we don't want to leak any intel to them." "Haha, he underestimated us," the old official said in a deep voice. "The upper command gave us the order to retrieve the missing investigator. We will contact the other countries and work together to suppress the dark net." Originally, Raylan had thought about using violence to directly raid the base of Darknet, but considering the safety of the Godaran investigator and Han Xiao's strength, there was no way it would work. The only way was to force the Darknet to give up the hostage voluntarily, so they had to cooperate with other political powers and pressure the Darknet. Even though Raylan did not want the other nations to know that they had the spaceship, compared to the future of the planet, this concern was negligible. Of course, the negotiation condition would probably require the other nations to join the research. However, since they had no progress in the beginning, maybe working together could maximize the potential benefits under the condition that everyone would share the research knowledge to each other. This was also a plan to deal with the individual strength of Han Xiao, and it was obvious that Raylan hated him. Raylan could simply have helped the investigator return to his own planet and build close ties with Godara as if they were lovebirds, but Han Xiao had ruined this honeymoon dream and cut off the red string between Raylan and Godara. The top officials are contacting the leaders from the other countries. If the darknet ignores us, then let's see if he can deal with the power from the 6 nations. More importantly, Han Xiao still thinks that he's invincible and the strongest man on the planet. He keeps on using the sacrifice that he made as an excuse to do whatever he wants. I hope this punishment will teach him that there are powers in this world that he cannot steal away. The old official laughed coldly. The players in the sanctuary all accepted the mission, the last bastion. The prize pool mission that seemed to be a main storyline kept on attracting more and more players to join. The prize pool quickly reached an astronomical number and met Han Xiao's requirement for the number of participants. As more and more people discussed the mission, the mysteriousness of Han Xiao thickened. Counting the numbers of days left, the day of the arrival of the tourist group grew ever closer. Dit. The galactic communicator rang, and it was a new message from the Acute Galactic Travel Agency. They would arrive at planet Aquamarine the next day, and the agency reminded the passengers to pack the luggage. The position to aboard the spaceship could be controlled by the communicator, so Han Xiao could choose whichever place he wanted to enter. It's finally here. Han Xiao suddenly got up, and his heart was pounding with excitement. The memories of battles in the galaxy boiled in his mind, and the scenes popped out in front of his eyes like bubbles. In the universe without borders, one civilization after another, new powerful storyline characters, millions of new species, the battleship that sailed across the universe, life filled with danger and action, all the memories flashed before his eyes. The galaxy was the future. To first explore the universe was to build a proper foundation for the future growth for later actions from updates of the version. The galaxy would be the spotlight. Han Xiao calmed down and thought, I have all my equipment and have chosen dozens of team members. I have all the resources that I need for the journey. I don't have to worry about experience points for quite some time, so I've dealt with all the small things. His accumulation in planet Aquamarine was the bottom line for exploration in the galaxy. When dawn arrived, the thundering sound of engines broke the silence of the sanctuary. A heavily armored convoy quickly responded and drove to the gate. The players and strangers on the street all looked toward the convoy. The logo on the cars represented the highest ranked troops that were under the direct command of Han Xiao. Players suddenly realized what was happening and followed behind the convoy. The message spread wide and far, and all the players in the sanctuary heard the news and headed toward where the convoy was heading. Waves of people all flooded through the security walls and reached the red flat plain. Chapter 318, The Clueless 6 Nations. Translator, Atlas Studios. Editor, Atlas Studios. When the convoy stopped, the horde of players stood afar as they stared at the supply boxes that were dropping from the sky. They quickly stacked up like a mountain, and the chosen professional players stood by the boxes without moving. As for Han Xiao, who had the full attention of the players, he was just standing alone at the side, looking up into the sky, as if he was waiting for something. Quite a number of players activated the record function with excitement. It looks like he's leaving today. Everyone was curious about how Han Xiao would leave the planet Aquamarine. The players had long waited for this moment. They followed Han Xiao and looked upward. It was right at the crack of dawn, as the sun on the horizon slowly raised up. The heavens and the earth brightened while chasing the darkness away. Right at that moment, in the area right above the convoy, the players realized that there was a small black dot that was the size of an ant. They focused their eyes, and they could soon see that it was an outline of a spaceship that was descending toward the planet. Look! Spaceship! At the beginning, the crowd became exhilarated as they talked with each other. But as the shadow of the spaceship became larger and larger and the sky started to dim, the excitement and noisiness of the crowd quickly died down. Tens of thousands of people's jaws dropped. The scene in front of their eyes was so shocking that they were lost for words. When the spaceship was still high up in the sky, the outline was only the size of a green bean. It was only when the spaceship was a few hundred meters above the crowd that they realized the sheer magnitude of the spaceship. The spaceship was large enough to block out the entire sky above. My God, just how big is the spaceship? As the players looked up into the sky, they could not see anything other than the black spaceship. They only saw the outline of the spaceship that was near the horizon. There was one poem that everyone remembered as the spaceship landed. Dark clouds bearing down on the city threatened to overwhelm it. The Shorthorn Star was the main spaceship of the tourist group. The large-scale commercial spaceship had a controlled ecosystem, and it was comparable to the size of a space station. It could travel in space for a long time with radar equipment, powerful turrets, and a high-energy shield. Just this one single spaceship could sweep over planet Aquamarine. The crowd was in great shock, and it was even more so for the chosen professional players. They took a deep breath. In their eyes, Han Xiao was just a character on planet Aquamarine, yet he had the ability able to call in such a large spaceship. It was simply phenomenal. However, because Han Xiao had shown so much power and capability, the teammates started to gain confidence. The magnificent futuristic scene left a powerful impression in the players' hearts. The monstrous machinery and the natural environment juxtaposed each other perfectly, and it was perfect for a desktop picture. The players quickly took out their cameras and captured the view. A box-shaped levitating cabin detached from the main spaceship and spat out blue flames that pushed the dust in the air as it landed right in front of Han Xiao. This was the specialized cabin that carried the passengers into the spaceship. The metal cabin had a high-tech style, with a very clean, detailed structure. The cabin door opened up, and folded stairs extended in front Han Xiao. "Let's go now, I can't wait to get a drink." Kurlot got in without hesitation and left all his burdens behind. Han Xiao waved at the players, and they had to do hard labor, carrying all the supply boxes up into the cabin. After everything was done, the cabin door closed by itself, and it shot right up to the sky and docked into the Shorthorn Star. After a few seconds, the Shorthorn Star quickly moved up. Despite its huge mass, it did not make any noise or release any flames as it flew away, giving the crowd a weird feeling. When the Shorthorn Star stopped by a planet, it would turn off its engine and only use the anti-gravity core to save fuel. Through the window, Han Xiao looked down on people that had turned into the size of ants and let out a deep sigh. "After spending so much time on this planet, I've finally moved on from this place." And up into the sky they went. On the plane, millions of players stared at the spaceship that disappeared into blue heavens, and the sunlight showed up again in the sky. Inside the Sanctuary 3, Hyla stood behind his sister, and she put her hand on the shoulders of Aurora. The two of them both looked at the Shorthorn Star. "Will he ever come back?" Aurora asked curiously. Hyla remained quiet and shook her head. "It's a wider world out there. After stepping out of here, there's no reason for him to come back. Hey sis, why didn't we also join him?" Hyla patted on Aurora's golden hair and did not reply. "Hey, you're hurting me." Hyla then realized that she had used too much force and quickly let go. The bear cub on the side roared at the sky, lay on the ground, and covered its head with its paws, sobbing, as if it was sad about the departure of its owner. Aurora patted on the bear's fur and was also sad. She asked quietly, "Will we be able to see him?" "Sooner or later, we will." "But you just said that he won't come back." "Yet." Hyla did not explain. Aurora's heart skipped a beat as she understood the hidden meaning. Then her mood was happy again. "He's gone." In Sanctuary 1, Bennett was doing a video call with Huang Yu and listening to the intel. "From now on, Sanctuary 3 is under your command. Don't try to change Han Xiao's arrangements, but other than that, you can decide on the other matters." "Okay, thank you, Sir Bennett." Huang Yu was motivated since his hard work had finally paid off. "Don't thank me. Han Xiao recommended you before leaving." "I understand." Huang Yu nodded and carved it in his heart. After ending the call, Bennett, with a smile on his face, logged into his secret account and opened the threats that the Six Nations had sent him. Bennett had dealt with the pressure from Raylan and other countries by himself as he did not want Han Xiao to worry about these things before departing. Now that the ship had sailed, the way that his old friend had left was enough to shock the Six Nations, since Bennett himself also was surprised at the scene of departure. He wondered how Raylan would react to that. Because there were too many witnesses of the event, it brought a large impact all over the world, with the video of the spaceship spreading on the internet. Every citizen on planet Aquamarine saw the landing monstrous spaceship that was as large as a mountain. The Shorthorn Star did not state their purpose of entry, and this massive ship frightened the Six Nations. As the satellites detected the Shorthorn Star, the Six Nations had panicked and sent the Air Force to try and communicate with them. Yet, the Shorthorn Star had ignored them and showed no intention of talking to the highest power of the planet. Before the Six Nations could do anything, the spaceship had then left without a sound. After the visit of the enormous spaceship on planet Aquamarine, the Six Nations feared what had to come and quickly tried to get intel. When they found out about the truth that the Shorthorn Star had just come to pick up Han Xiao, the Six Nations had been flustered at first, but then they were suddenly struck dumb with amazement. The mysterious spaceship that had surpassed planet Aquamarine by countless of years was just there to pick Black Phantom up. How did he do it? What else was he hiding? Although they knew that Black Phantom was capable, this action was so unbelievable that no one could ever have thought of it. This time, the Raylan was bamboozled. They had never thought that this would happen. The target whom they were threatening had already jumped out of the pool and stopped playing with them. No wonder Han Xiao had ignored all the threats from the Six Nations, since their hostility was just a speck of dust. Chapter 319, The Shorthorn Star. Translator, Atlas Studios. Editor, Atlas Studios. As Han Xiao left without a sound, Raylan were left in confusion. They could not even lay their finger on the world above, yet Han Xiao had simply achieved this without breaking a sweat. For the Six Nations, there were still a lot of unknowns about the nature of the galaxy, and they only had the downgraded version of the galactic communicator, so they could only contact the Godaran civilization and were unable to use other functions. It was complete suppression of difference in civilization, so the Six Nations had to comply. Therefore, they did not know about the function of the Galactic Travel Agency and had no idea how Han Xiao had achieved what he had done. In their eyes, they felt that the ship was the unknown space organization that backed Han Xiao up. The man had always been mysterious, and they were always clueless. As the major political power, having one individual that had allies more powerful than the entire planet, their fear and anxiety was off the charts. Raylan was the party who had started the aggression against Han Xiao, but the pressure was meaningless. On top of that, they had also revealed the secret that they had the spaceship. They had suffered a double loss, and it pained their heart. The difference between reality and expectation was huge, as if a student was trying to beat Han Xiao in exam, but then they realized that he was already confirmed to go to a top university in a big city. Raylan was left only with disappointment. Through the box-shaped cabin, the Earth became smaller and smaller as Shorthorn Star flew in the sky. The blue sky slowly turned dark while the anti-gravitation engine operated quietly. They headed into the dark universe. Suddenly, the cabin shook violently as it tried to escape the atmosphere. Before they knew it, they were in space. Planet Aquamarine was filled with the deep blue color of the ocean with bountiful fertile land and specks of yellow dots. From above, one could see the entire land in detail, and Han Xiao saw that Andrea was covered in black, showing that the war and nuclear explosion had the most damaging effect at this area. His experience on planet Aquamarine flashed by in his eyes. He had started with nothing, then he had finished accumulating enough resources to start rising in this planet. And now, he was taking the next step to the higher stage. He felt sad leaving his friends behind, so he still had some feelings for the planet Aquamarine. As he left the planet, part of his heart was still in his home. Even though he was not extremely close with people such as Bennett, Hyla, and Aurora, they had great potential in their ability. Just from the perspective of benefits, Han Xiao hoped to see Hyla and her sister grow stronger and provide assistance. Staring at the planet that was slowly drifting away, he quietly murmured, "I will be back." The next moment, Han Xiao looked away from the planet and headed toward the hallways in the spaceship. Whoosh! The metal door that connected box-shaped cabin to the main spaceship split into 4 diamonds and retracted into the walls. Right through the door was a straight metal hallway that extended forward. The light on the side of the door turned from red to green, indicating that the passengers should follow the path. "Come on, I need to get a drink," Kurlot urged. "Why are you rushing? Your money is with me." Han Xiao waved his hand, and the professional players stopped their chit-chat and pushed the payload forward. Halfway through the tunnel was a mechanical arch door with a monitor on the side. It was used to detect the body condition and identify the species of the passengers to have a suitable arrangement. The group walked through the door, and the monitor showed that everything was normal. The floor suddenly opened up, and a transparent container popped up. Inside the container was a translator for passenger to use. Han Xiao and others all put the translators on, and the monitor spoke with a digital woman's voice. "Welcome to the Shorthorn Star Travel Agency. You originally reserved 50 seats, but we have detected more, please pay the additional fee of..." With a few more people than originally planned, Han Xiao followed the instruction. The account still had a bit more than 700 in as. The voice then said, "Payment confirmed. Class, Economy. Personal luggage storage function activated. Please store your luggage and move forward." The wall on side opened up, and inside was a moving conveyor belt that transported luggage to the warehouse. After putting in the supply boxes, the group kept on moving forward. Finally, they reached the end of the hallway. It was a large elevator. After they stepped in, the elevator moved up and down, but it also moved sideways. The galactic commercial spaceship did not force the passenger to stay in one place. It was more like a cruise that had a lot of entertainment and resting spaces. Different sections of the ship had different environments to accommodate different life forms. For example, species similar to humans that needed oxygen and low gravity to live shared one large lobby. Species that needed special environmental conditions also had their own section, such as aquatic creatures and anaerobic organisms. The elevator stopped abruptly. The door opened, and the bustling atmosphere crashed into the group. In front of their eyes was a large empty space, the lobby for economy class. It was wide and open with all sorts of entertainment, such as a place that was a mixture of a bar, a ballroom, and a party room, as well as resting areas and personal rooms. One side of the lobby was a large window that could directly see the beautiful universe decorated with the stars. All sorts of living creatures walked past them. They saw a bird talking to a lion that was wearing a suit. There was also a dwarf with a great big, bushy beard drinking beer with a beast with sharp teeth. Every one of them had different scents and voices, and they were mixing together in a small space, which gave the players a weird feeling, as it was their first contact with aliens. "What kind of species is that? Their heads look like a hammer," Second Prince said in surprise. "You look like them." Sun Eggplant laughed. "Don't bullying him so much," King Admiral said. "Only I have the right to do so." Second Prince gave both of them a middle finger. Rainy Kim stood by the window like a demure, celestial princess, her radiance reflecting the wonders of the infinite universe itself, enjoying the night sky. Twinkle Fried Rice slowly moved up to her, and just as he wanted to flirt, Hao Tian pulled him back. Hao Tian dragged Sleepy Winter and Twinkle Fried Rice and said in a serious tone, "Later, we will go find a chance to see if we can activate some missions." "Fried Rice, why do you look so bitter?" All the players opened their eyes and chatted about the new world. However, Han Xiao was not surprised. He had already seen too many species after a lot of reading. A female member of staff wearing a uniform with a human shape walked up to the group. She had light red skin and smiled at the group. The staff member scanned through the group, then she directly walked up to Kurlot and said with enthusiasm, "Respectable Godarin, your room is ready." In the Colton star cluster, Godarin was a well-known species with high standing. Commercial traveling groups were equivalent to public transport in space because it was the cheapest way to travel. So, it was rare to see a Godarin. The staff member assumed that Kurlot was the leader, and he ignored Han Xiao and the others. Kurlot was a bit surprised and looked at Han Xiao. He then replied, "Okay, I understand." The staff gave the room number and authorization to Kurlot, then she gave him wink before leaving. It was obvious that she was interested in him. Godarins were the best species in the star cluster, and the woman, who was an Aquax species, would not mind if anything happened between Kurlot and her. Some species could have a hybrid offspring, while others could use IVF. The relationships between different species in the universe were very open. However, Kurlot was insistent about being a pure blood, so he had no interest in females from other species. He handed everything to Han Xiao. Han Xiao took the things. He found it funny that the Godarin was mistaken as a leader. "We are on the ship and have finished the transaction," Kurlot said. "When can I contact the headquarters?" "No worries, the final stop is Ubairli Hub. You can head back by yourself from there. I won't stop you." "That's good." Kurlot rubbed his hand and added awkwardly, "I want to get a drink, so. I only have that much." "Don't waste it all." Han Xiao gave him 10 inas. Han Xiao thought to himself that he was such a kind person for giving pocket money to a person whom he had scammed. After receiving the money, Kurlot skipped toward the bar. He believed in hedonism, so most of his money was spent on drinks. Han Xiao brought everyone to their room, and the players' faces were filled with surprise. Bunhit Dog excitedly recorded everything. Occasionally, other species looked at the group, but they withdrew their gazes rather quickly as space humans were really common. There were a lot of human species in the economy class lobby. After reaching the door of the room, Han Xiao thought for a while and turned to the group. "You are free to do whatever you want. Also, try to get some information from other passengers." The players could not hold back their curiosity any longer. After hearing this, everyone scattered to the lobby. Players were useful intel gatherers, so there was no need for him to do that by himself. Also, players could earn some quests from other passengers and earn some INAS, and he could use some method to exchange goods with players. In the end, the players were essentially making money for Han Xiao. Han Xiao smiled. I guess it will be the first time that the passengers have met such passionate people. Chapter 320, Development Plan and Scavengers. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. After getting rid of the others, Han Xiao walked into the room alone and let out a deep breath. He finally had the chance to be alone with the first step of entering the galaxy completed. There were many opportunities in the universe and many plans for what to do next, so he needed to decide on one path to take. Firstly, he was located in the Garden Galaxy of the Colton Star Cluster, and with his strength, this area was dangerous but just right for him to grow. As a LV-70 mechanic, grade C super, he was considered at the middle level of the supers in Colton Star Cluster. The universe was divided into many star fields, and the Colton Star Cluster belonged to the Shattered Star Ring star field. The Shattered Star Ring was located at the edge of the visible universe and considered rural. Its name came from its structure. This star field was like a broken, shattered ring of stars, every star cluster being part of this ring. At the heart of the Shattered Star Ring was a dangerous place with an enormous cluster of wormholes, where the universe's waste was being thrown out from numerous star fields, floating in the area and forming a waste dump. Because of this, scavenger groups were very active in the Shattered Star Ring. There were quite a number of uncommon occupations in the galaxy, such as the galaxy pirates, scavengers, mercenaries, colony explorers, and so on. The Shattered Star Ring did not have a single ruling authority, only scattered star clusters and galactic civilizations, so there were many areas with a worrying level of law and order. The Shattered Star Ring was rightfully ruled by West Sadling, but this civilization only had their emissary reside at the local offices and hardly managed the area. West Sadling was the official name of the Universal Civilization Federation of Light. The bigger the area, the more dangerous it was. Han Xiao remembered many opportunities, but according to the current situation, the best decision was to stay in the Colton Star Cluster and grow first. It was still version 1.0, and he was not very familiar with the storyline in the galaxy since the players at this stage had yet to enter it in his previous life. However, some large missions were most likely still the same. The first step is to get an information source. Ubaili Hub is chaotic, and there are many agencies from different organizations here. I can try to attach to an organization and get some initial intelligence, Han Xiao thought. As long as he could get his hands on some information, he would be able to know which were the large storyline missions suitable for him. The most important target was to become stronger. He was not restricted by the version and was always ahead of the players, so he had to maintain this lead in this world filled with danger. It was like riding a boat against the current. If he did not go forward, he would be going backward. For now, Han Xiao's main class was stuck at the class advancement mission. He had to first find a subclass, level up to LV80, get enough attribute points, and increase his int to more than 400. He did not want to take this lightly. More and more experience would be required to level up, so he wanted to find a valuable, rare subclass. From what he had earned during the Pro League, the amount of experience that he had in his interface was about 2,700,000,000, which would last him for quite some time without having to worry about experience expenses. The amount of resources and equipment that he had accumulated had the value of thousands of INAS, and the specific value depended on the buyer's demand and the fluctuating value of machinery, which could not be determined before the deal. The other class advancement requirement was to have 5 mechanic class advancement knowledges. In the universe, there were comparatively more ways to get super knowledge. Although the very high-level knowledge was controlled, class advancement knowledge were not difficult to get. Some financial groups and organizations were even selling class advancement knowledge, which meant that he could get them as long as he paid the money. As long as he had enough money, he could even buy all the class advancement knowledges. And in terms of earning money, not that Han Xiao was bragging, he was really not bad at it. Players are equivalent to labor. I can get INAS through them indirectly, and they can also provide assistance to me. If I make them mercenaries, I can get paid while they do the missions. However, in order to make a large amount of profit, the best is to sell rare items, such as mining for some precious minerals, or get rewarded from some old wanted missions. The existence of players was his advantage, and they could be of great help if he did things the right way, which was why he had chosen to bring the players along. Growing and leveling up was the core target, but Han Xiao also had another target, which was to try to solve the mutation disaster in Planet Aquamarine of version 2.0 in advance. In version 2.0, many planets in the Shattered Star Ring encountered the mutation disaster, and the origin of all that was the evil organization of Colton Star Cluster, Dark Star. The novice planets in other star fields would have different storylines. Dark Star was a rebellion from the Godaran civilization, and Han Xiao was very familiar with its history. The origin of the Dark Star mostly came from the discrimination from Godara's pure blood beliefs. Many of the Dark Star members were hybrid Godarans, discriminated against because of their bloodline, which led to their extreme mindset, wanting to overthrow the Godara government. They believed that Godara's regulations were corrupted and that they were the new Godara of the new era. Every civilization had their own mindsets and traditions, and there was not any absolute evidence that inclusion was the more advanced choice. All civilizations had their unique qualities. To respect the traditions and habits of the other civilization, compromising with each other during contact yet not fully accepting them, was the norm of communication between species in the universe. Of course, at the initial stage of universal exploration, cases of uncompromising conflict between civilizations occurring due to their irreconcilable difference in beliefs, habits, and characteristics were not the rarest. Such as the human race and species that fed on humans, there was almost zero possibility of these species communicating with each other, but these extreme civilizations only suffered in the progress, and as the super civilizations implanted their laws and regulations, even these species had to accept the existence of each other. Godara originated from magic. Before they came into contact with the galaxy, all Godarans were pure blood. Only after they mated with other intelligent species did hybrid Godarans appear. So, the pure blood belief had started to spread, emphasizing on the importance of their traditions. Those with authority were all pure blood, therefore, the pure blood and hybrids started to witness new class differences. As Godara grew, more and more hybrids were born, and the bloodline talent of Godarans was gradually diluted. Thus, they took more importance in the pure blood belief. The extreme ones of the pure blood believers did not even consider the hybrids as the same race. The conflict became ever more intense, and finally, Darkstar was born, acting against Godara in almost every aspect with an extreme and evil style of doing things. In order to solve the mutation disaster, I have to start with the Godaran civilization. The mutation virus had very strong latency. In his previous life, it had only been taken seriously after the disaster completely exploded, so all he could do for now was only prepare for the future. These two targets were the key points for the current stage. He contemplated the details of the plan, turned on the communicator, browsed the interstellar channel, and focused on the information regarding the current situation and environment of the Colton Star Cluster. At this time, an announcement was made from the broadcast. Everyone, please return to your rooms. The ship is about to speed up and enter the light jump tunnel. Turbulence might be experienced. If you suffer from dizziness, please do not panic, it's a normal reaction. Rapid footsteps could be heard outside the doors. All of the passengers returned to their rooms, including Kurlad and the players. Black safety belts came out of the wall. Safety measures like protective cabins were too much to expect with such low-grade travel agencies. After buckling up the safety belt, the room doors locked automatically. A loud roar came from within the spaceship, and the metal walls and floors were trembling. Right after, a force came from above and pressed everyone strongly into their seats. This was the reaction force even after being weakened many times by the various devices. Shorthorn Star shot out a blazing flame and sped up rapidly. Streams of light suddenly appeared in the darkness outside the windows, like entering a tunnel of light. As the pressing force reached its peak, Shorthorn Star flashed and turned into a stream of light. The engine operated at its full capacity. After entering the tunnel, the reaction force rapidly weakened because of the internal stabilization devices. Next stop, Garden Galaxy Star Zone 5. Travel time, 3 days. Please enjoy your trip. In those 3 days, Han Xiao kept a low profile on the ship, whereas the players were rather warm-hearted. They started conversations with the other passengers and asked to help them passionately. It was the first time that these passengers had seen such warm humans, and they realized the players had very limited knowledge after having conversations and assumed them to be natives. Kurlad was having a dark blue drink at the bar when a hybrid human with sharp ears and bony face walked up beside him, tossed an Inez coin, signifying that this cup was on him, and said with a smile, "You boarded from planet Aquamarine, right? That low-class planet is just a low-class civilization, and the people you brought onto the ship are all natives, aren't they? What does that have to do with you? Kurlad looked at him sideways. He, are you interested in a deal? My name is Sisoli. I do this person was wearing gloves. He discreetly lifted up the gap and showed the tattoo on the back of his hand, a bird wrapped in chains. That was a label for a slavery trade organization, one of the many scavenger businesses. Kurlad waved impatiently and said, F***ck off. I don't want to waste my time with you. Public spaceships were rather chaotic, with quite many hidden gray organizations looking for suckers. Therefore, people who had the choice all disdained traveling with galactic travel agencies. Kurlad disliked being in contact with scavengers very much. It spoiled his mood so much that he even lost his interest in his favorite dark blue star bubbles. Don't be so quick to reject. I can see all of the natives that you've brought along are supers, so their prices will be quite good. Consider it, okay. At this time, Han Xiao's cold voice appeared from behind the two. I think it's time for you to leave. Sisoli turned his head around and saw Han Xiao standing behind, expressionless. He smiled without caring, ignored Han Xiao, and gave Kurlad a slight bow before leaving.